2019 on July 16th. And I think we need to do roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem Zelensky,
Is it?
Councillor Townsley, Councillor Schmall, Councillor Weimer,
Here.
Councillor Schachter,
Here.
Councillor Smith.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Do we have any agenda changes? Hearing none, moving on. Disclosures of any conflicts of interest. Again, none. All right, so now we have our citizens appearing before council. All we ask is that you please reserve your comments to 3 minutes. And when you reach the podium, state your name and whether or not you live within city council or city boundaries, sorry. So we'll start with Jennifer Victor.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Victor. My address is 607 West Bank Road. I live outside of Glenwood Springs city limits. However, my husband and I own and operate a business at 51659 Highway 6 in Glenwood, better known as Vicko's Truckford Drive-In. I'm here tonight to put a face to one of the persons affected by the proposed shutoff of Mitchell Cooper Water. Our business has been in the same location for 73 years. Aggressive actions by the city are threatening our business. I do not understand why we're in this position. I watched the September 18, 2025 meeting recording carefully. City Council approved collection of a past due debt by Mitchell Cooper and an authorization to disconnect related to that debt. City Attorney Carl Hanlon said City Council, any illegal action would be related to collection of debt only. City proceeded with legal action. Mitchell Cooper did not dispute the debt. Mitchell Cooper attempted to work out a payment plan with the city, but they would not agree to a payment plan. Still, we made current payments plus payment on the past due. In May, we received notice the city was moving forward with disconnection because of the past due balance, but despite the fact we were actively paying. Shareholders gathered together and paid the balance through a special assessment. This was a strain for many of our shareholders, but the past due balance was paid in full June 5th, 2026. Almost 4 weeks after our full payment of balance due, City issued a letter on July 1 to CDPHE. Shareholders were copied. Letter is noticed to CDPHE that city is shutting off water, will not turn on water until all shareholders purchase a meter, sign up for city water service. Mitchell Cooper dissolves as a company. Mitchell Cooper signs over their infrastructure to the city. This is way beyond collection of a debt. It's drastically different from the tone of the September 18 meeting where you authorized legal action for collection of a debt. I've poured through the agendas and minutes to find where City Council approved any of these actions. I can't find anything. I submitted a Cora request. I received only the minutes from the September 18 meeting. I understand City Council can't respond due to ongoing litigation, but my rhetorical question is what changed with City Council's concern for the residents and businesses of the Mitchell Cooper District? In September, there was genuine concern from each councilor about turning off water to residents. Now all bills are paid and we have threats of turning off an essential public utility for several hundred people. Infants, elderly, sick people, workers who support local businesses, businesses who support the community and collect sales tax on your behalf, visitors to our community. If I look around at every side street in town torn up, I want to guess it's motivation to improve infrastructure. Is that worth harming residents of the city? Is it worth cutting off an essential public utility for several hundred people and shuttering businesses, putting people out of work and removing them from their homes?
Thank you.
Kirk Hedstrom. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kirk Hedstrom. You might say that I live within the town's city limits. I want to address the council this evening because when I have occasion to leave town and come back in from visiting Aspen, I see a sign that says that there's a noise ordinance that's strictly enforced. I sit in the community quite often and I can't tell that that would be the case because I hear a lot of really loud cars, trucks, and motorcycles all day and evening long. And I would like to encourage the police department, code enforcement people, whomever else might be appropriately involved in such a thing, as to do a little bit more in keeping the community quiet. I was recently tackled by a police person because I was simply yelling over the loud traffic at 6 o'clock in the evening and was accused of disturbing the peace. My peace is difficult for me because I'm so broken. I'm emotionally sensitive to loud noises and bright lights. And so I would like to comment as well that the apocalyptic sirens and extraordinarily bright lights that are on our police cruisers these days are an eyesore and an earsore. I would also like to comment on the idea that the police department has a vision statement that says it is basically their responsibility. That's not the word that they use, but they endeavor to create a safe and enjoyable community. And I would say that their vision statement should simply say that that is their that they should be in support of us making our own safe and enjoyable community, as opposed to them trying to bite off way more than they can chew, since they have they have such a lacking of resources when it comes to trying to create a safe and enjoyable community that's impossible for them to pull off. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Brad, plants.
Hello, my name is Brad Plants. I do live within the city limits. I also have a business within the Mitchell Cooper district, and I simply just want to submit a letter to council. That's
Great, thank you.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Christine Del Rio.
Sorry. Okay.
Take your time.
Okay, sorry about that.
Clock
Yeah.
hasn't started.
Okay, good evening, council. My name is Christine Del Rio. I live in Silt, but we own a business, the Ponderosa Lodge in Glenwood Springs at 51793 Highway 6 in Glenwood Springs. Tonight, you've heard from some other Mitchell Cooper ditch holders. My husband maybe will be here, another one of my sons, and I have a couple of other sons that would like to speak as well. I'm a mother of 9 children who were all born at, or most of them born at Valley View Hospital. I grew up here in Glenwood Springs, went to prom with Steve 1 year, raised right here in Glenwood. And as a local business owner, I want to leave you with one final undeniable truth. We have done everything right. Our family has always believed in being good neighbors, good citizens, and responsible stewards of our business. When a dispute arose, we ensured our accounts were paid 100% in full. We did our part. It is incredibly disheartening to sit by and watch the city administration staff use a bureaucratic oversight by a completely separate ditch board as a weapon to target a local family. This isn't just a legal file on a desk. This is our life, our livelihood, and the workforce housing of the locals, and several thousand tourists who keep our property running. You have the power to stop this aggressive, unnecessary legal pursuit. We ask that you direct the city manager and city attorney to honor the 42-year historical agreement put into place in 1984, amended in 1986, to protect the paid in full shareholders, and let us get back to serving the community we love. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and then it looks like I've got Luis or Luis Del Rio.
He's on his way, so.
Okay, so we'll skip that. Noah Del Rio.
No, go ahead.
Good evening. Good evening, my council. My name is Noah Del Rio. I was born at Valley View Hospital and raised right here in Glenwood Springs. My livelihood is directly tied to the operation of our family hospitality business. The Ponderosa Lodge serves as a fundamental gateway for thousands of tourists who visit Glenwood Springs every year. We provide lodging that allows visitors to come here, experience our community, and spend their hard-earned money at local businesses, the hot springs, rafting companies, downtown shops. We contribute heavily to the exact tourism ecosystem that keeps this city thriving. Without water, a hospitality property simply cannot exist. We cannot clean rooms, we cannot cook meals, we cannot provide a place for people to stay. The city water department, intense legal pressure campaign feels like a calculated attempt to devalue our private senior water rights so that the city can just claim them without paying fair market value. Under the Colorado Supreme Court, Jubaca, whatever ruling, municipal ditch company shares represent distinct constitutional private property rights belonging to the shareholders, not just the corporation. Not just the corporation. A board's failure to fill a timely response in court should not give city attorneys a license to strip local families of their private property rights. We ask you tonight to protect the small business that support Glenwood Springs ecosystem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, should we have Luis?
Good evening, council. My name is Luis Del Rio, property owner of the Ponderosa Lodge, and definitely appreciate your time and effort and what you do. As my son had just mentioned regarding the use of our water and the Mitchell Cooper ditch, we just ask that you would consider, make sure that we are protected as citizens of Glenwood Springs, and also the best interest to our rights and the property that we have. Appreciate your time and attention to this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Lucas, would you like to come up?
Sure, yeah. Let's see.
Go ahead and state your name if you would.
Yeah, my name is Lucas Del Rio. That's my father, Luis Del Rio, my brother Noah. Good evening. My name is Lucas. I was born here at Valley View, just like my brother. Raised here in Glenwood Springs. I work every single day here at the Ponderosa to help run and support this business that my family owns. Growing up here in Glenwood, we were always taught that this town cares about the people who actually live and work here. Right now, this valley is facing a massive housing crisis, and working families are getting priced out everywhere. The Ponderosa Lodge actively provides secure, stable workforce for housing 3 separate families, totaling 5 households overall across the property. We aren't talking about a massive resort. We are talking about actual homes for locals. By threatening to cut off or manipulate the senior water rights of the Mitchell Cooper ditch, the city is directly threatening the roofs over our heads. If the property loses its historical utility connection or gets crushed by force, city utility mandates, it will literally push local families out of housing that they depend on. We are not faceless corporate developers trying to exploit loopholes. We are locals born in your hospital, educated in your schools, and working in your family's hospitality sector. Our family's account is 100% paid in full. It is fundamentally unjust for the city to leverage an administrative mistake by corporate ditch board to target low-abiding paid citizens. Please intervene and protect our local workforce housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then it looks like we'll probably hear from Brother David.
Good evening, council. My name is David Elijah Del Rio, and I was born here at Valley View Hospital, grew up here, raised in this valley, and my family has deep roots here. My grandfather ran Alpine Motors on the south side of Glenwood, and my grandmother worked at Valley View Hospital for 13 years, and my parents have spent nearly 13 years working hard and contributing to this community. I'm standing here because honestly, fairness and doing the right thing should matter in our local government. The money the city said was owned. Sorry, the money the city said was owed has already been paid. The whole financial dispute is totally paid. The whole
Okay.
the whole financial dispute is totally resolved. But for the same reason, the city's legal team is still trying to use legal technicalities to mess up an agreement that has predicated this community's water uses for 42 years. If our city is allowed to exploit legal loopholes just to squeeze our independent local businesses and mess with multi-generational families, there's then no property owner in Glenwood is really safe. Today, it's our historical watersheds, but tomorrow it's going to be someone else's property rights. You guys were elected to serve people, not just the utility departments. We ask you to use the authority tonight. Tell this city attorney to stop chasing this default judgment, honor the historical agreement, and work out a resolution that actually respects paid in full shareholders so my family can keep living and working in the town we love. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right. So it looks like now I have Jonathan A. Ford. Hi.
Board. So I'm hearing about the ordinance about like staying on the corners or whatnot. Okay, we get it. Yeah. It's unsafe at certain areas. And I'm not here like, to like try to uphold what people do out there, but me, I don't panhandle. I'm out there for shits and giggles. And for me to be in the paper, I just feel like, that guy just kind of like threw me under the bus. You know what I mean? I couldn't even get on the bus back to Carbondale yesterday, so I can go back to work in Mountain Town. So just throwing it out there. Thank you, City Council.
Thank you. All right. Jen Rose.
Hi, thank you for City Council for listening, and I'm super not comfortable doing this, but thank you for the opportunity. I live and work in Glenwood Springs. I've lived here and my whole entire life. I just want to share personally what I've experienced over the last couple years in downtown Glenwood Springs. As someone who spends a great deal of time downtown, there are a lot of individuals struggling with addiction, struggling with alcoholism. I've seen public intoxication, people smoking marijuana during the farmers market, public defecation. Most of you have seen that photo. I posted it on Facebook. Nothing happens. Nothing's changing. People are entering businesses, eating without paying, engaging in theft. These situations are difficult for everyone involved and nothing is enforced. I've also noticed that many residents, visitors, and business owners have expressed feeling uncomfortable, unsafe in certain areas downtown. As someone who cares deeply about this community, and I'm an active member of the community, I am not just out here talking, I do the work in this community. I believe it's important that these concerns are acknowledged and discussed openly. In my opinion, we also need to be honest about our community's capacity. I don't believe we currently have the infrastructure or resources other than what Gabe provides, and he would like to speak. He just didn't put his name on the list. To adequately support everyone who is struggling with severe addiction, mental illness, or chronic homelessness. That is a challenge for both those in our people in our community. Sorry. I question whether giving cash directly to people is improving the situation. It's a safety issue on intersections, and what I've personally observed, it does not appear to be addressing the underlying issues or helping the people move towards long-term stability. I believe lasting solutions require access to treatment, mental health services, housing support, and accountability, not simply financial handouts. I actually think that that is contributing to the problem because it's some people's job. It's dangerous on the intersections. I recognize homelessness is a complex issue, and I understand that many people are experiencing genuine hardship. I am compassionate, and I believe in accountability can exist together. Those struggling with addiction or mental illness deserve opportunities to receive help, while our public spaces should remain safe, welcoming, and accessible for everyone. Thank you for listening. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. All right, so I've got Judy Haynes. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you all again. It's been we had a little rain, so I'm very happy about that.
Good day.
Hope we have some more. My name is Judy Haynes and I'm a resident here. And I'm coming to speak about my friendly usual topic, 100 Midland Avenue, Suite 210. So I was kind of counting down. I was counting. Can you guys hear me through my
Yeah.
mask? Okay, thanks. I was counting the days since the revocation happened. I think it's been like 89 days since the planning and zoning revoked their permit, give or take a day in there. As far as I understand from Mr. Hanlon, there has been no response from the landlord. And maybe I know something that's been happened recently, but they haven't had any response from the tenants or the landlord. And it seems that the landlord, as ignoring stuff, that was a kind of a pretty penny that we are giving up and leaving on the table. Perhaps we should sanction the landlord a little bit better so they would pay attention to us. The other thing is, I'm wondering if we're just arguing with ourselves. If the landlord has not responded and the tenant has not responded, who are we talking to who says they're going to pull out the big guns and make our city pay for intervening with this landlord? So I have that question. Who is saying anything to anybody? Are we just arguing or talking within our own group here? I believe one of the most important things we're talking about is costs. What kind of costs would it be for our city if we chose to dislodge them from find the landlord and have the landlord dislodge ICE? Those are legal costs. They could be significant. I don't think that we would have to lose. I think everybody who stood up to these people have been able to win. Standing up is important. We need to do that. The other thing is it's a really narrow definition of cost. If we consider the other costs involved in allowing this group to stay here and continue on, that we're taking out a lot of other things, including our cost to our reputation and to the trust we have. These people are acting without, are going to treat them without treating people equally. If we have one landlord who is being a bad actor, and let that happen, every other landlord who doesn't like being zoned has a leg to stand on to come after us. So I want you guys to think about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I've got Erin Anderson.
Hello. My name is Erin Anderson. I use they, them pronouns, and I live in Glenwood Springs. I'm here tonight to, as clearly as I can, lay out the historical timeline around the ICE detention center operating out of the Midland Center. So many people have come here so many times to try and explain what's happened and the impact it's having on our community and the truly unknown amount of liability we are continually exposed to on a daily basis. City Council is attempting to create a quasi-judicial process that is in violation of Colorado law. There is a very clear municipal process for permitting, and a decision was made by the body that legally has the decision-making authority. There are clear legal separations of municipal powers for a reason. I'm unsure why this body feels they are exempt from the official legal process. There is no legal backing for this. It is blatant judicial excess that actively infringes on people's ability to seek redress through normal judicially backed processes. Our municipalities do not have the authority to decide when to selectively enforce laws. Our municipalities, in fact, have the clear direction and responsibility to equally protect all citizens and businesses. A quick glance before I came in here today, I actually can't tell how many federal agencies have offices in Glenwood Springs. So is our official position that any of the buildings leasing any amount of space to any federal agencies don't have to apply for or pay for permits, and we will allow them to operate indefinitely with no enforcement, even in the absence of a permit or certificate of occupancy? That's a hot take. Seems kind of crazy unfair to all the people trying to actually do business here. A retroactive certificate of occupancy with no supporting documentation should be legally null and void. There are such deep conflicts of interest and absolute abandonment of our professional life-saving obligations from town staff. The attorney, manager, economic director, development, building inspector, fire marshals, all of you have had the opportunity to just follow the law and do your jobs, but instead this is where we are. These are extreme and extraordinary circumstances that indicate a coordinated effort amongst government offices to protect this brand new judicial process the city has cooked up for this. Everyone has been on formal notice of duty to act since April. The city of Glenwood Springs staff have communicated in emails with federal agencies for the purpose of chilling First Amendment protected participation of residents expressing concern of this ongoing unlawfulness. Here are the facts. The special use permit was revoked by planning and zoning because it was violated. Full stop, no further questions needed. There's never been an I-3 inspection, the legal requirement for a detention facility, conducted. Never. There is no certificate of occupancy. The permit issued was not applied for by either entities, and as far as we can tell, no fees were ever paid for it. I know we think a final decision is going to be made on August 6th, but unless we are following and enforcing laws, the city of Glenwood will be facing decades of litigation from businesses and human rights groups alike. Please do your jobs.
Thank you. All right, so that's all that I have on the list in front of me. Is there anybody else in the room that would like to speak? Yes, please come to the podium and just state your name, whether or not you live in city limits. Thank you.
My name is Gabe Cohen. I am the director of Jesus Saves Homeless Day Shelter here in Glenwood Springs. I also have 3 sober living homes in Rifle and run a recovery program, peer recovery program called Discovery Cafe that we house within the Jesus Saves shelter. I don't have anything prepared today to speak. I was asked to come by a friend. Obviously, I'm passionate about being of service, helping those that are struggling with mental health issues and addiction. I'm a person in recovery. I've experienced homelessness. I've experienced incarceration. I'm on the other side of it now. That's why I do the work that I do. So I have compassion for those that are struggling in trying to take care of themselves, and compassion for law enforcement and the citizens that whose lives can be disrupted, and business owners by people that are struggling and they're out in public. I don't have any answers. I don't have solutions. I know we need more mental health services for these people. I do something that's on my heart that I want to say that's probably not going to be too popular with the population that I serve. But I am a person that has been incarcerated repeatedly in my life. And it wasn't until I got sick and tired of being locked up and facing the consequences that finally it compelled me that I needed to do something different with my life. During those times of incarceration, I was able to get sober. I was able to get some mental health treatment, and yet another opportunity when I got released to do something different. And so I would just say, I'm actually for whatever the new laws that are being put into place with the no camping, the no panhandling. But I will say, if it's just going to be, you're going to get a ticket and community service, I don't really think that's quite a significant consequence that's going to deter people from doing that. And I understand the plight. I know they're in survival mode. I will say, I've also heard if we weren't providing the services that we provide, which is lunch, breakfast, I'm going to try to do overnight shelter again this year, sleeping bags when it's cold, laundry, showers. I have a clothing closet if they need clean clothes. If somebody's hungry, I'm going to feed them. If someone's cold, I'm going to give them a blanket. I don't feel it's my responsibility to solve the homeless problem, but you know, I'm here to help the community in any way I can on both sides of it. So I just wanted to say that tonight. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else in the room? I kind of want to stand up and give it like a little clap. I just want to say congratulations on your sobriety, and I appreciate your efforts and you're doing the work. And so, you know, I'm grateful that you're here. Good. Did we want to respond to any of the comments that we heard this evening?
Sure. I mean, Mitchell Cooper, as was noted, is subject to litigation, so
Right.
we're not going to be able to talk very much about what's going on there. I mean, I will note that Mitchell Cooper and the city have a long history throughout the, the agreement from 1984. Mitchell Cooper did sue the city initially. The city has responded to that litigation. And we have, followed various court orders that have been entered in both of those cases. The city also sued Mitchell Cooper. Beyond that, I think the record speaks for itself that the city has tried to resolve this multiple times over the years to no avail. And, I think the city has put its best foot forward in making those offers of compromise. And so that has pretty much led to where we are now. So I think we're happy to provide additional guidance on some of the public comment and the requests that were made this evening. But I think we need some time to kind of go through where we are and where that request would stand.
Steve, yes.
I just wanted to add that strongly held feelings and stuff, but everybody here stayed respectful and professional, and I appreciate that. And I think my city council can hear you better that way. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody? Oh, looks like Councilor Smith.
Thank you. Anticipating an opportunity for city council to discuss this some more in one forum or another?
I mean, I think you're always welcome to ask for an executive session to request legal advice on the matter. I think that would be an appropriate forum initially. And then if there's something coming out of that you wish to discuss publicly, that would be the appropriate way to handle it.
Are we planning one of those?
We don't have it on the schedule now, but I'm happy to entertain whatever you guys would like me to do.
Thank you.
Any other comments from council? No? All right. Thank you all for coming tonight and speaking your mind. I appreciate you executing that opportunity. We're going to move on to council announcements. Seeing none? Oh, sorry. And that's okay. Councilor Smith.
Oh, thank you. Just a quick rundown on some recent engagement of other entities and advisory boards to the city. The RAFTA, Burlington Transportation Authority RAFTA board met on July 9th, and some quick highlights from that meeting. The board approved under consent agenda an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Glenwood Springs related to the proposed South Bridge, focusing primarily on funding share from RAFTA, access to the railroad trail corridor, and some other construction details. Also had a presentation on paratransit services that overlap with Glenwood Springs and some kind of their own version of discussing are there redundancies in our various transit services. So it was a pretty creative discussion. The RAFTA board affirmed their opposition to state ballot measure initiative number 175 and translated that more now to the ballot measure itself as different from the petition where the previous letter was focused. There was a very creative discussion about what's called the hogback service, the service of RAFTA that connects basically between Glenwood Springs and the west end of Garfield County, and finding ways to continue the funding for service to two towns in that end that do not have a membership in RAFTA. The two towns have each come up with some pledged money, and Garfield County is actually talking about matching that. So it was quite a progress from a stuck place earlier. The Transportation Commission met last week and finalized its recommendations on project, program, and policy priorities. They did not rank their project recommendations, but just provided a menu of things that they think are important priorities to be incorporated into budgeting and staff planning as opportunities arise. They also had I remember the city council discussed at its last meeting a potential fare change for the dial-a-ride, for the Ride Glenwood Springs on demand transportation service. And the Transportation Commission delved into that pretty thoroughly, and in the end offered a formal recommendation to City Council that I think will be presented when that comes back up for City Council to consider again. As encouraged by City Council, the Historic Preservation Commission met on July 9th with the city's Tourism Fund Advisory Board to see if there was some mutual funding or some shared funding opportunities there. Discussions seemed to go well. We'll know soon the response from the Tourism Board, but they were mostly interested in ways to help with science, interpretive science, informative science that would help tourists appreciate the historic work that one commission is doing for the sake of the promotion that the other commission is trying to do. So it was a pretty creative conversation. Correspondingly, at its July 13th meeting, the Historic Commission cranked up their sign recommendations and their sign plan. So it's a kind of clicking along as maybe was envisioned. The Housing Advisory Board met just a couple of nights ago. We're going to use a newly arrived state grant to prepare an impact report on its first year of the commission's first year of work. And that's, I think, going to be revealing in terms of success stories and also lessons that can be applied into the next phase the City Council has now authorized. They had quite a creative discussion about state mandated housing needs assessment report that the city has submitted. Has not been accepted fully by the state. So there is discussion and will be discussion tonight about the notion of the city joining with the city of Aspen in their version of that state report. So we'll have a discussion on that later. And I'll be happy to kind of carry into that some of the things we heard from the housing board members. I think somebody ought to announce, so I'll try it, that next Monday is going to be the police de-escalation training, primarily for downtown businesses, but I suppose others may be interested, and the police chief may want to, the public safety chief may want to clarify this, but Monday, July 20th, 8:30 to 10 in the morning, also available via Zoom. The basic idea is how to talk down unruly customers or unruly non-customers in a less confrontational and hopefully de-escalating kind of way. So it sounds like a pretty neat opportunity on Monday morning. And finally, there are crisp, fresh, new pavement markings all over town. The paint is crisp and sharp on center lines, school corners, bicycle lanes. This is another very specific, very tangible safety benefit from the voters' approval of the streets and infrastructure funding. So it's nice to see something out there that really reflects well on the voters' decision and helps make the place a nicer place to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Weimer.
Super quick. I've been asked to pass along a message from Jillian Sutherland, who's our Executive Director of the Downtown Development Authority. Employees, managers, and owners of downtown businesses are invited to a free de-escalation training with the Glenwood Springs Police this next Monday, July 20th at 8:30 a.m. right here in the council chambers. This training focuses on learning practical skills for handling tense interactions with customers or members of the public. This will focus on helping employees communicate effectively and know when and how to seek help. We'll also talk about alley safety and the proper use of our trash compactors. The training will also be offered via Zoom with Spanish translation available and will be recorded and distributed to businesses following the training. Thank you.
Do you know if that recording will be available to the general public as well?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah, of course.
Anybody else? Any other council comments? No? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. There are 3 items. Item A, approval of the July 2nd, 2026 council meeting minutes. Ordinance 2026-13, which is an ordinance of the city of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, amending section 120.030.150 of the Glenwood Springs Municipal Code to include prohibiting solicitation at certain intersections in the city. This is second reading. Item C, ordinance 2026-14, which is an ordinance of the city of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, amending section 120.020.100 of the Glenwood Springs Municipal Code, prohibiting unauthorized habitation, camping, and sleeping. Second reading. Also, item D, ordinance 2026-15, which is an ordinance of the city of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, amending section 100.010.060 and 100.010.020 of the municipal code regarding collection and management of food waste and organics for the city of Glenwood Springs. This is also second reading. And finally, item E, resolution 2026-17, which is a resolution of the city council of the city of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, amending the city of Glenwood Springs right-of-way permit fees and fine schedule. I will entertain a motion. Counselor Shatner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
And call for the question.
It passes 6-0.
Fantastic. All right, moving on, we've got a presentation on the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. We welcome Watkins.
Good evening, Council. My name is Watkins Folk Gray, Housing Development Manager. And so this item tonight is a presentation about the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, which is analyzes our housing needs for the whole region from Aspen to Parachute. Okay. And the study was commissioned by Aspen, Snowmass, and Pitkin County. So we did not, we participated kind of lightly, but we did not pay for this study. But we are going to benefit from it because they are sharing all their data, their analyses with us, and it's available to all members of our region. You're going to hear the presentation tonight from Rachel Shinman from EPS. And I want to say that the study that they've done, it complements and differs slightly from our strategic housing plan that we adopted in 2023. Differs mostly because of methodologies and for reasons that I think Rachel can get into. So what we're doing tonight is really just a presentation for informational purposes. You don't need to vote on anything. Love to hear all your questions and your feedback, but this is just informational only. So with that, Rachel, can you say hi to us so that we know that we can hear you?
Yep. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, coming through loud and clear. So floor is yours. If you want to share your screen, go for that. Ryan, is this our screen that we're sharing right now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to unshare our screen so you
Perfect.
can share unless
Yeah.
you tell me otherwise.
No, I think it'll be easier for me not have to next slide the whole time.
Yep, sounds good. If I can figure out how.
Bear with us, Rachel.
No problem. Now you're going to have to bear with me and make sure that it goes the right way. Can you see the full screen?
Yes.
We're still seeing
Amazing.
slides on the left.
Yeah, I was going to say, I
Oh,
think.
okay. You're seeing the presenter view. Hold on 1 second. I'm not seeing the presenter view. This hasn't happened before. Interesting. 1 second. Oh, here we go. Okay. Oh, no.
There you go.
I think we got you.
Perfect. Okay. Every time. every time. Well,
Technology is awesome.
it really is. Thank you again for the time. As Watkins said, my name is Rachel Shinman. I'm a vice president with economic and planning systems in our Denver office. I know we at EPS have done a lot of great work with the city over the years. And I'm here to present the findings of the regional housing needs analysis that we've been doing over the past year and a bit, actually. And as was mentioned, this is intended to comply with the requirements of Senate Bill 24-174, which requires that most communities in the state complete a housing needs assessment. It is also just an up-to-date housing needs assessment that can be used to support applications for Prop 123 funding, a rural resort income waiver petition, other affordable housing grants, and also just help plan more regionally for housing needs. Given what we know about the nature of the economy and housing in this region, taking a regional approach to this helps us understand some of those drivers. A couple things to reinforce. This is, like was mentioned, this does not need adoption. This does not need a vote. It is not legally binding in any way. So we'll see numbers on the screen. This doesn't mean that we have to build that number of housing. It doesn't mean that, the distribution by community is what it needs to be. And then we'll see some recommended strategies, and those are just a framework of recommendations. Now, following this, SB 174 also requires a housing action plan. That's a separate study, and that needs to be adopted by the city council. So that's when, you'll really get into talking about what types of policies we want to have in an adopted document. This is not that. This is just understanding what's going on in the region. And like was mentioned, this was a full regional effort. We got everyone from Aspen to Parachutes, the whole Roaring Fork, whole Colorado River valleys, which was really, really important to us to make sure that we could really paint the picture of the region as a whole, including both economic centers, commuting drivers, and there, what we think are some pretty interesting trends that came out through the analysis, particularly in how some patterns look like they're starting to shift compared to what we've been seeing for decades. So it's a large study. There's a lot required in the legislation, and I'll note some of that. And as Watkins mentioned, that's part of the reason why the numbers in this are different from some previous efforts. But you got a phase 1 and phase 2 report. And so phase 1 is on the left. That's really the numbers of it all. We did that separately because some communities in Pickens County were looking to do that Proposition 123 rural resort income waiver petition. It's a mouthful. And there was a timing component of that. And then phase 2 is some of the more qualitative pieces that we layer on to understand what the housing need really means on the ground. And they will be combined into one single report, and that will be submitted to DOLA on behalf of every community that participated, which would allow every community to have the box checked for compliance for the needs assessment for SB 174. So I'm going to walk through a pretty high level overview of the data and the trends. If any of you have read the report, first of all, thank you. I appreciate it. And also you'll see that this is really just skimming the surface, but helping us understand what some of these key drivers and key changes are and how they inform our estimates of housing need. So the first piece is demographics, and a lot of this will not come as a surprise. So what we're seeing is that in Pickens County, the population has been and is generally expected to remain stable. And when we talk about projections, we're using State Demography Office data. So one thing to keep in mind is that their projections are typically based on continuation of current conditions to a point. They account for some type of change, but if we make a wholesale change in housing conditions in this region, we would expect some of these things to adjust a little bit. But in general, there's a pretty big difference between the two counties. So Garfield County has been growing, is projected to continue growing, while Pickens County is projected to remain stable. That is not a declining population. It's just relatively low or no growth. And then when we look at what's happening among the population in both counties is aging. This is not a surprise. This is something that's happening in most communities across the country, across the Western world. but we'll notice some differences between the communities on the next slide. And then something that's particularly interesting, and again, I think will not come as a surprise, is that as we look at the nature of the population in each community, we see larger households and more children in Garfield County than in Pickens County. But even within Garfield County, as we move west from Glenwood Springs, those numbers increase. And when we start to look at housing cost trends, those factors align pretty well. So this is just some numbers to underpin that. So in Pickens County, 22% of the population is under 25 and 22% is 65 and older. Whereas in Garfield County, a third of the population is under 25 and less than 15% is 65 and older. So that's where we see that younger population. And then when we look at the types of households, so the census defines households as a family household or a non-family household. A family household is just related by blood or marriage. It's self-reported. But we have over 2/3 of households in Garfield County are considered family households and over half in Glenwood versus fewer than 50% across all of Pickens County. So again, just helping us understand what some of those population trends are, who is living where and how that's changing. And then the second piece of housing demand is the economy. We know that jobs are a huge driver of housing demand in this region. And so when we look at jobs, at a base level number, Garfield County has 1.5 times as many jobs as Pickens County, which is not unexpected. Garfield County is a larger county. So there's more of everything. There's more people, there's more jobs, there's more housing. That's not unexpected. Similarly to population, it's expected to grow faster than Pickens County. And while Pickens County is still a strong economic center in the region, right, there's a reason a lot of people commute a long way each way every day to work there. The occupations with the highest levels of employment in both counties have some of the lowest wages. So the jobs that make up the bulk of employment in our communities are paying some of the lowest wages. And then we also see lower commuting numbers in Garfield County than Pickens County. And so we looked at commuting both in terms of from outside the county to in, but then also in terms of distance, because this region is pretty unique in its commuting, not just patterns, but the nature of commuting. Where someone can live in Basalt and work in Basalt and live and work in a different county, looking at county to county flows for commuting doesn't really tell us the whole story. And so what we did is we looked at how many people are commuting 50 miles or longer each way. And so in Garfield County, it's about 23% of residents. And that's sort of it's almost a one end of the county to the other. And if you're going Parachute to Carbondale, I think I haven't double checked the map in a while, but it's about 50 miles, I believe, but someone can fact check me. So then when we look at the details of the job, so what jobs do people have? Again, just there's more jobs in Garfield County. And this part really stood out to us because in a lot of the conversations that we have, people say, well, Pickens County jobs pay more, so people drive down to Pickens County to work. When we look at the overall median wage, so this is all jobs, what's the wage where half of people earn less, half of people earn more? There was a difference of about $1,800 between the counties in 2024. Now, if we start thinking about what's driving long commutes and where people are living and where people are working, the motivation to drive an hour and a half each way every day, particularly in the winter, in summer torrential downpours, hopefully we can have some of those and get some water this year. $1,800, people will start to think about that. When the difference is $10,000, it's a much different calculation. And so as we see those median wages start to come together, we might start to see some different calculations among residents and employees in terms of where they want to live and where they want to work. And then again, the top 4 occupations in the county. So just a little data note, we look at employment by occupation rather than industry to get a better sense of the actual jobs that people have. Because if we just look at, accommodation and food services as an industry, that includes not just, the kitchen staff in a restaurant and the house cleaners at a hotel, but it also includes the management and the legal team and the accounting team. And so when we look at occupations, we get a better sense of the full distribution of wages in the area. And so these 4 occupations make up 43% of all jobs, and 3 of them are paying less than median wages. So again, that's, over 30% of jobs in these key occupations are paying less than $50,000 a year for the median. So again, half of people are earning more than that, but half of people are earning less. So then we look at housing. And so, the top line of this, there's nearly 2 times as many housing units in Garfield County compared to Pickens County. On its face, that's not a big deal. Like we said, Garfield County is a bigger county, but Garfield County only has 1.5 times as many jobs, but twice as many housing units. So what that tells us is there's a lot of people living in Garfield County who are not working in the county. Now, again, that's not a surprise to anybody who lives or works in this region, but it's nice to see it reflected in the data. And then we can also see the nature of the housing inventory reflected in this. So when we look at vacancy rates, which in a place like Denver, where I am, vacancy can mean something that's waiting for someone to rent it, that's sitting waiting to be sold. There's a lot of reasons for a unit to be vacant. In our mountain regions, vacant units are typically vacation rentals, second homes, third homes, fourth homes, what have you. And so in Pickens County, 41% of units are vacant, whereas in Garfield County, it's only 8%. And so that again tells us, an 8% vacancy rate is much more akin to a local resident community, whereas a 41% vacancy rate is really reflective of a resort destination community. And these rates have both increased since 2010. Not a ton, but they have. It's also important to keep in mind, and we'll come back to this in terms of what we're already doing, that nobody in this region is starting from scratch. So we already have almost 4,500 units of affordable housing in the region. Now, most of those are in Pickens County right now, and that's just because the need has been bigger and more present in Pickens County for longer. But what we're seeing is that there's more affordable housing inventory moving down the valley and then into a lot of other communities. And so this is where there's another difference in the 2 studies. And so if folks have questions, we can go into the data questions. But generally speaking, when we looked from 2020 through 2024, which was the last year we had a full year of data when we did the analysis, the median prices for single family homes in the lower valley, so that's Glenwood and Newcastle, we kind of grouped places by region, we're still under $800,000. So again, that's half of homes are selling for more than $800,000. But that had increased a lot since 2020, which we see in almost every community, interestingly, with the exception of Aspen. But that's just because prices were already so high that they weren't really going up further. It's a trend we saw in Vail as well. But in most other communities, we had double-digit annual percentage increases in home prices. And then even for townhomes and condos, what used to be a more affordable housing inventory is becoming increasingly out of reach. And so then we start looking at, well, what can people actually afford who are living here? And so if we look at a 2-person household earning the county median income of $82,000, and this, just another note, we're not using the HUD median income categories, we're using local incomes and then using local categories that are actually used in programs. And so if there's, if you notice a difference in what 100% AMI is, that's probably why. So that household can afford just over $2,000 monthly in housing costs. That's assuming 30% of gross income is spent on housing every month. To afford the median price house in the lower valley, that household would have to earn at least 250% AMI. That's over $200,000 just to afford the median priced house. And part of the reason we're seeing this push into the lower valley and further west is because these households, even earning almost $250,000, can't afford anything further up valley if they're looking to purchase a home. And so when we look at the distribution of sales, so this is looking just at 2024, which again was the most recent year we had the full year of data for when we did the analysis, over half of sales in the Glenwood Newcastle area were only affordable to folks earning 200% or more. So that's $164,000 for a 2-person household. And even as we move further west through the Colorado River Valley, 41% of sales were still only affordable to households earning $123,000 or above. And so that's where we see this pressure is moving further and pushing out more and more households. So what happens when people can't afford to purchase a home when they want to is they rent, and that puts increased pressure on the rental market because we have more households looking for rental units than there would otherwise be if ownership homes in their price range were affordable. And so rental data is pretty hard to get. For the home sale data, we work with a realtor and we get data from the MLS, and so we have all the home sales. Rental data is a little trickier. So the Chafa statewide apartment survey includes the Glenwood Springs metro, but nowhere else in the region. So we don't have a point of comparison. And if anyone has looked at rental listings in the area lately, these numbers do not feel right to what's on the ground. What we've heard in a lot of our outreach for other projects in the region is that $2,500 might get you a 1-bedroom unit in Glenwood Springs. And so the Zillow data does a little bit of a better job. So again, the most recent data we could get was for a year ago. And so a typical rent was just under $2,800. So that feels a little bit more ground truth. And that was still a 12% increase from just 2 years before. And while we don't have the data for Pickens County, we know the rents are higher. And so again, we're having that pressure pushing people geographically further down valley and then west. And again, this is something that should not come as a surprise. When we dive deeper into the affordability, it gets, I think depressing is the right word. So here we have the median sale price for all homes for 2024 for all our different regions. So the Upper Valley, which is Aspen and Snowmass, the Mid Valley is Basalt and Carbondale area, Lower Valley, like we said, is Glenwood Springs, Newcastle, Colorado River Valley is west of Newcastle to Parachute, and then the unincorporated county. And so what this shows is that it's challenging for everyone, essentially. A household earning the Pickens County 120% of Pickens County median income. So Pickens County median is about $100,000. So it's higher than Garfield County, which is why the bars are different. That household can afford the median priced home in the Colorado River Valley. And then they're no longer a Pickens County household. And so what this shows is that home ownership is just increasingly out of reach. Folks need more and more money just to try and get into the market. And so that's where we're really seeing this increased pressure across the board. And so when we look at changes over time, so this is sales by year by affordability, and this indexes the affordability by the year. So the 2015 affordability is calculated using the 2015 median income and so on. So they're apples to apples comparisons as much as we can. And so we can see this increase in the market leading up to COVID, the market high sales volume in 2020 and 2021 that's consistent across this region. And what we're also seeing is that there's, until 2024, which is interesting, there was this increasing share of homes affordable only to households earning over 300% AMI. And then, a decrease in these smaller, the lower income levels. Now, this increase in 100 to 120, like I said, there's some interesting pieces in this, but for the most part, home ownership is becoming increasingly out of reach. And then when we look at the Colorado River Valley for comparison, we have way more colors on the bottom than we saw in the Lower Valley, and particularly in the Mid Valley and Upper Valley, those colors don't exist on this chart. And so while those homes are being offered for sale, we all of a sudden have much more demand for those, because for folks wanting to live and work in this entire region, this is one of the only places where home ownership opportunities are available. And so when we saw more family households and more children, this makes sense. People are going to want bigger space. They might want some outdoor space, all of those things that are just financially unattainable in most of the rest of the region. And so we took all of this data and we calculated housing needs. And so this methodology, while it's similar to how we have typically done housing needs assessments, for decades, the specific methodology is outlined by the legislation. So every community is calculating these generally in the same way. There are some adjustments that we can make for local conditions, which we'll talk about. But in general, we're looking at the existing housing demand or the catch-up need, which is looking at what is the need based on current conditions right now. And so in this case, we're looking at reducing or eliminating overcrowding and temporary housing conditions, and that includes homelessness, reducing long distance commuting, so those 50-mile or more each way commutes, and then addressing housing needs for unfilled jobs. And what we hear in a lot of our outreach is that most unfilled jobs are unfilled because people don't have housing, and so they're not going to move here. And then we look at future need. So over the next 10 years, what is our projected housing demand? And so this is where we can make this more relevant to the local context. And so we could look at household growth or employment growth. But we know that in general in this region, employment growth is what's driving housing demand. And so we're looking at the 10-year employment growth for the region. And then we're also looking at retirement. And so like we saw earlier on with the aging population and particularly the aging labor force, we're likely to see more retirements in the next 10 years than we have previously. And some of those people who are retiring are going to stay in the community, which means that a job is opening up. It's not a new job, it's just a job that someone's retiring from. But if they don't leave their housing unit, then it's not a one-to-one swap. And so we actually have a net new need for housing because of that. And so that's included in the future demand. And then the last two things that we do are so this is all done at the county level, and then we distribute the need based on jobs. And so what we'll see is that the percentage of Garfield County jobs that are in Glenwood Springs is the percentage of Garfield County housing need that is in Glenwood Springs. And that again is prescribed by the legislation. And then we take out anything that's currently being built because that is anticipated to meet some of that need, and then we get the net need. A couple things to keep in mind before we go to the numbers. Unless a community's housing need is 10 units or something, communities are not going to meet 100% of the need. I typically don't like using these numbers because they create almost an overwhelming sense of, well, we can't do that, so we can't do anything. What this does is it helps us understand the magnitude of need and what's driving it. And so what that helps us do over time is decide how to prioritize policies, how to allocate resources, if there's a component that we should focus on first compared to others, where there's opportunity for regional collaboration, all of those pieces. It's not setting a development goal, because we also know that in a land-constrained and water-constrained community, we cannot build our way out of this. And this report is not intended to send that message. These units can be made local affordable housing through a number of mechanisms. And so buy downs and rental assistance and all of these components are ways to increase the inventory of housing available to and affordable to local residents without necessarily building new housing. So just want to keep that in mind before we moved on. So this is the overall number. And so across the entire region, Pickens County and Garfield County, we have a total need through 2035 of just under 7,700 housing units. And so that is 2,850 in Pickens County, 4,830 in Garfield County, those numbers at the bottom. And then the lines in the chart show us where these needs are coming from. And so what's interesting here is that in Garfield County, it's about a third existing need and almost 2/3 future need. So a lot of the need throughout Garfield County is really driven by growth. And that's what we're seeing with households and jobs. We're seeing a lot of growth moving into Garfield County. And so that makes sense based on the data. Whereas in Pickens County, there's a lot more need based on current conditions. And there's still a fair amount of need based on growth, right? There's still almost 1,200 units, but it's not the same sort of split between current and future. And future employment growth in particular is the largest driving factor in that. And so then, like I mentioned, we take that overall need and we allocate it by jobs. And so here we can see Glenwood Springs has 40% of jobs in the county. And so 40% of those 4,800 units are allocated to Glenwood Springs. And so overall, over the next 10 years, we have a total gross need of 1,922 units, and that's about 1,200 units of future need and then about 700 units of existing need. And so then what we do is we take out pipeline units. And so we look at what is currently being built, being developed, coming online to help meet this need. And so there are a number of projects in the city. And so we take those out. And so what actually happens is the city goes from 40% of the county need down to 39%, which feels like very minimal, but that's actually showing that, you know, that it's having an impact. And so it takes us down to just over 1,800 units of net need for Glenwood Springs. And so that's 39% of the county need and 25% of need across the entire region, Pickens and Garfield County. And so this just shows that we allocate it by income and tenure. And so this is just showing the distribution of current need and future need, and then ownership and rental. I will say there are a lot of assumptions that go into these. And so these are definitely not prescriptive. Like, we are not saying there's no projected need below 50% AMI, but because we use jobs to forecast the need and where wages are, it means that in the math, they don't show up. Whereas for the current need, we have to use the current income distribution. And so this just follows exactly the current distribution of households by AMI in the city. And then ownership and rental, we developed these tenure splits with staff based on really programmatic capability and funding capability. And so, you know, we don't want to show a whole lot of ownership need at low income levels when it's just not possible to provide that housing. And so that's not saying that people at those income levels don't want to own homes. It's not saying it's not possible, but we're not making it sort of a piece of this effort, especially as we start to layer on some of the resources and strategies. So that was a high level summary of phase one. Phase two is a lot quicker. There's fewer numbers. So this looks at housing problems and challenges, which again is a title prescribed in the legislation. Probably not what I would have called it, but we're looking at what are some of these factors that exacerbate these affordability challenges and supply challenges. So the first is overcrowding, temporary housing, and homelessness. And so this is actually something that's also included in that housing needs calculation. We will be the first to admit that data is pretty bad on this. And so the estimate that we can make based on available data is about 600 households across Garfield County experiencing one of these. It's probably higher, but this is the data that we have available to us. And that's caveated in the report because we don't want to make it seem like the issue is less prevalent than it is. Then cost burden. So this is any household that is paying more than 30% of their gross income on housing. So that's 30% of pre-tax. It's an industry standard factor that's used in pretty much every housing study, and a lot of funding programs are also based on that. And so we mimic that in this to make sure that any findings will be applicable to any programs, resources, grants, funding, anything like that. And so in Garfield County, almost half of households are paying more than 30% of their income for housing, which again, not necessarily unexpected. It is a very expensive community to live in. So then another component we have to look at is displacement risk. And so there's 11 factors here that we consider. I will say this is still an emerging area of analysis in the realm of housing studies. And so we don't have a model that says, you know, this area has X% displacement risk, or, you know, you score a 3 out of 5 and it means X. What we do is, again, similar to the housing needs, we look at what are we seeing in these data points? How do they compare, and how might it help us prioritize or think about what to do? And so all 11 are summarized in the report. We summarize 5 here. And so the first is cost burdened low income renters. And so we just saw overall cost burdened households. This is looking specifically at households earning less than $75,000 a year who rent their home. So these are households that can be much more vulnerable to displacement. They're more sensitive to rent increases, to increased cost in any other place in their budget. Oh, whoops, that hit the scroll wheel on the mouse. I did not mean to do that. And so in Garfield County overall, 70% of low-income renter households are cost burdened. And Glenwood Springs is a little bit higher at 74%. We would generally call that about matching the county. It's a lot. And again, this isn't necessarily telling us that we have to build rental housing affordable to these households. It's just helping us understand where some of the most significant needs are in the community. So we also look at older housing stock. So even folks who have bought a home, you know, they got in 20 years ago. If they own an older home, we know that maintenance and upkeep costs can be a lot higher on those homes. And that can actually make someone vulnerable to displacement if they cannot afford to do that. And so this is where there's actually a pretty significant difference. Across Garfield County, 14% of housing units were built before 1970. In the city, it's 31% of homes. And then we look at a couple population level factors. So one is single parent households. Again, just a single earner with dependents. The one wage, or, you know, we know a lot of these people are also working multiple jobs, but it has to go further. And so what we see, it's interesting, in Garfield County, the percentage of single parent households has actually increased since 2019. In every community in Pitkin County, it has decreased. And so what that tells us is that a lot of these households in Pitkin County may have already been displaced, and they may have come into Garfield County. And so we know that this population is vulnerable. And so if we don't address conditions now in Garfield County, they might just get displaced yet again when costs continue to rise. We know that aging residents also, if they're on fixed incomes, might need adaptive changes in homes. That can be a displacement risk factor as well. And again, this is where the county and the city are about the same. 13 to 15% of residents are aged 65 and older. We'll notice a couple of data differences throughout this, and that's just different years and different subsets of data. If you ever want a fun adventure, go on the census data finder website and look at the margins of error for some of the data sources. They're unfortunate, and it is the data we have available to us. But again, this is noted in the report, just where some of the years of the data don't align, just so that we're within the displacement risk assessment, we're using the same year of data for all of this. And so it just depends on within each category what the most recent year of data available is, and we want to match that across the board when we can. And then the last piece is disability. And so again, this is a factor that can make folks more vulnerable to displacement, particularly folks renting, but it really depends. And so across Garfield County, we only have this data at the county level. 20% of households have at least one family member or household member with a disability. And that there's, I think, 5 or 6 or 7 different disabilities listed. And that, again, is listed out specifically in the report. So then we just have regional development challenges. And so when we are looking at building new housing, we know it's not as easy in this region as it is in a lot of other places in the state. And so there's 4 main factors for this. We know there are a lot more as well. One is land scarcity. We know this varies throughout the region, but in general, in the mountains, there might be technically land, but what does it look like? What's the slope like? What's the soil like? Is it actually developable? We also know that development costs are much, much higher in this region than in most other places in the state. And so when we're trying to build housing that is affordable to locals, that gap just gets a lot bigger. And then we also know that there's non-local demand for new product. And so while that's much more present in, Aspen and Snowmass, what we're seeing is that pressure is really moving down the valley. And so if a house that has no restriction on it comes online for even $700,000, there's a chance that somebody from outside of town looks at it and says, that's a really affordable second home. I'm going to buy it. And so when we have those sort of external market forces, it makes it really hard to have non-regulated affordable housing. And then obviously water. And so, the numbers in this report are useful. And also, if we don't have the water to serve them, we're not building new units for that. And so that's definitely called out as a factor in the report. Okay, the last piece of this is, what do we do? And so the first piece to remember is we are not starting from scratch. This is a sort of high-level overview of every community across the region and what's being done. And you will notice that Glenwood Springs has an X in every single category. That is exceptional. So there is a lot that is already happening. We are not ignoring that. We are looking to build on it and say what's working, what can be improved on, what might we, not be doing that's not on this list because no community is doing it and we want to bring in, and where might we be able to work better together. And so again, none of this is prescriptive. The Housing Action Plan, which again is a separate study, will dive into this in a lot more detail. What this section does is we take from our findings from the needs assessment where this is guiding us in terms of what would most help. And so it's really trying to set the stage for that Housing Action Plan. And so we break it into regional strategies and then county and local strategies. And so regional are looking at this entire Roaring Fork, Colorado River Valley region and what can we all collectively do together. And so we broke it down into partnership building, collaboration, and education. And again, a lot of this is already happening. We're looking to build on it and really use it as a foundation for all communities in the region. And I think this is especially helpful. Glenwood Springs is a large community, and there are also a lot of smaller communities. And so where we can all work together, rising tide lifts all boats, try and just get some more structures in place. And so part of this is formalizing relationships and commitments. There are a lot of partnerships that are already happening, creating a framework for them that's sort of established that when an opportunity comes up, we don't have to start from scratch every time can be really helpful. And it can just enable this ongoing regional collaboration. So something like cross-regional funding, for example, there are communities that have funding and no land, and there are communities that have land and no funding. And so if we can get those communities to work together to collaboratively address a regional challenge, that's not something that sort of comes naturally in local government a lot of times. And then building on that, just collaboration. So the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition is doing a lot of work. And so really just maintaining the support of that. And within a lot of these strategies, figuring out where some of them can actually fit better within, sorry, I almost knocked my water over. I'm having a great time over here. Fit better within a regional entity. And so when we skip down to the end, establishing a housing navigator position, that's something that West Mountain is already considering and can really be best housed there. So we're not duplicating resources and efforts across multiple communities when really we can all work together and have a resource that serves everyone. And then a housing roundtable, we had a really great time with staff from all the communities throughout this process, getting together and sharing and talking. And so enabling that to continue, even just for knowledge transfer, sharing, understanding what's going on in every community, even if nothing formal comes out of it, can be really helpful just to maintaining some of the momentum that we have right now. And then for county and local strategies, so these are specific to Garfield County and Garfield County communities, developed with staff. I thought it was a super fun call because it's everything I love talking about, but really like an hour-long brainstorm session. And we got strategies into these 6 categories. So programs and preservation is really looking for what can we do for housing and folks currently on the ground. And then partnerships, again, looking higher level where this is within the county and even within the city between different organizations and entities, where can we work together more often or more efficiently. Planning is really just taking that higher level look of where makes sense for housing, what other resources are we looking for people to have, what type, general planning questions, what type of communities do we want to be, what types of amenities and resources and built environments, all of that. And then funding, regulation, and development are kind of the bread and butter of housing strategies. And so we know that none of this really can happen without funding. And so exploring where there are opportunities for new funding, where there aren't, and what those constraints are, because again, this is really about doing what we can with the resources that we have or that we can go get. We're not trying to, create a strategy that is just unattainable. And then regulation, just understanding where there might be opportunities to make it easier to get the type of housing that we're looking for in the places we're looking for it. And then obviously there will be some development approaches to this, but like I said earlier, it's not an entirely development centric strategy. So that was a lot. I hope you're all still with me. So definitely welcome any questions, comments, thoughts. Happy to walk through any of the data or analysis. Like Watkins mentioned at the beginning, this is intended for you all to have access to the data in the presentation and specifically to provide any thoughts or questions or feedback. So with that.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. I'm glad you found this job. You clearly have an enthusiasm and a passion for the topic.
Thank you.
All right. So more from you. All right. So we can bring it back to council for any questions. Councilor Smith.
Thank you. I've posed a few questions and maybe even a comment or two, partly from my own preview of this material, which is very thorough and very helpful, partly channeling the discussion that we had at the city's own Workforce Housing Advisory Board meeting a couple of nights ago. So in their behalf and my own thoughts, couple of definitional questions. What constitutes, and these questions can be directed however appropriate to our own city staff or to Rachel. What constitutes displacement? What does that mean?
That's a great question, and Watkins can jump in if you all have a local definition. Like I mentioned, it's still an emerging field of analysis and policy. Generally speaking, it is somebody involuntarily leaving their home. And so that can be a lot of things. It can be being priced out. It can be somebody buying it and kicking you out. It can be, you know, a developer coming in and saying, I'm buying this block and I'm redeveloping it. So it's a pretty broad definition, but in general, it just means that somebody who would like to stay in the home that they are in does not have that opportunity.
Great, thank you. The city staff highlighted this regional study as an opportunity for Glenwood Springs to kind of chime in or join on. In what way has city staff already been engaged in this Aspen-initiated so-called regional study?
Hey, Rachel, before I jump into that, would you mind not sharing your screen?
Oh yeah, sorry.
See each other a little more.
Yeah, there we go.
This study was it was commissioned by our Valley communities, so we participated only very lightly in the creation of this study. I'll note that this was kind of a follow-up in some ways to a 2019 regional study that EPS also did. And I wasn't with the city at that point, but I think Glenwood did participate in some way there. So, you know, we do some regional outreach efforts. We work with our partners some. The main way that happens is through the Regional Housing Coalition, which is made up of all our communities.
Thanks.
And I can just add that throughout this entire study, we've had representatives from every community in the region involved, including the counties and every municipality. A lot of that was helping to provide a lot of the data that went into this, because a lot of it, like building permits, pipeline developments, a lot of those things are held at the local level, and we want to get them from the folks who are closest to them. But then also going over some of the methodology questions. And, you know, early on we were looking at, do we look at this in terms of two counties or one, like, do we add up all the numbers and then do it? And so those were questions that we had with staff to sort of get the feedback from all the communities to make some of those conversations or just, you know, make some of those decisions throughout the process.
Thank you. While this is characterized and entitled a regional assessment, and indeed there's a lot of seemingly very useful not only data, but kind of connecting the dots analysis in this that seems useful to Glenwood Springs. Do we need to worry? To what degree do we need to worry about this nonetheless being an Aspen-initiated study and maybe more of service to Aspen's needs than Glenwood Springs needs? Is that a problem, or am I over worrying?
Rachel, maybe I'll start and you can jump in.
Yeah.
That's a great question. Because I think that the data and the information in the study should concern us. We are a region, and so what happens to our neighbors will in some way affect us. And talking more specifically about how that'll happen is complicated, and I don't know if I'm prepared to really, take a stab at that yet. But we should know what's going on in our region, and that's why this study is important.
I can add a couple things. So some background on how this came about. Like I mentioned, some Pickens County communities submitted a rural resort income limit waiver petition for Proposition 123 funding. And so there was a time component of that to get the waiver petition in with the different funding deadlines for Prop 123 programs for projects in Aspen and Snowmass Village that were looking to apply for that funding. And so we actually pivoted from another project we were doing with the city of Aspen. They said, we actually need this housing assessment now. And because they had the funding that they could put to it, they didn't have to go through a grant application cycle or anything. They said, we're totally willing to pay for this study. And we said, that's great. We can't look at housing needs in this area just for Aspen or just for Pickens County. If we're looking at housing in this area, it really needs to be a regional study. And so we did not do this effort for Aspen or for Snowmass Village or for Pickens County. This was really looking at the data and dynamics and the needs in the region as a whole. And so while the initiative and the funding came from, that end of the valley, so to speak, EPS prides itself on sort of impartial, third-party, unbiased analysis. And so I would hope that none of this comes through as, catering to one community over others.
Thank you both. I think my last question. Nope, sorry. 2 questions and then I'll quit and save comments to see if it's even necessary. In a couple of the data slides about needs assessment and something called net need, which is basically the total minus what's already underway. There's a number listed as the, whatever you called it, non-required, non-committal. There's a number projected over 10 years. And if I understood right, was that number was based on the trends that we're seeing currently. What happens in year 11 and year 19 and year 24? Do we assume these same projected growth in jobs and shortage in housing beyond, or?
That's a great question.
It seems like a small chunk.
Yeah. So it is, again, based on the requirements of the legislation. We're looking at a 10-year horizon. SB 174 also requires that these needs assessments are updated at least every 6 years. And so 6 years from the time this gets accepted, there will have to be another one that would then look another 10 years out. So we'll have overlapping time periods, but accounting for changes in trends.
That's helpful and reassuring that this is going to be revisited constantly. What's your data or your instinct say about what happens in year 11, 15, and 20 compared to what's happening between now and year 10?
Oh boy. How much time do we have? It's a good question. I think the things that were surprising to us as we went through this was the compression in the changes in wages between the two counties. That's not something that we expected to see. Some of just the population dynamics, like there's a chart in the report that has, I think it's household populations or population by age. They kind of show the same thing, and the communities are ordered from Aspen, like geographically to Parachute, and it is like stepwise. And so I think we're seeing like the communities change when, people with families are feeling like they have to leave in order to do that. And depending on how things go, like jobs might follow eventually, but also, it's really hard to tell. Because again, we have some agency in this. And so depending on what, we as the community in the region do to address these needs, that can change the arc of the trends to a point. But yeah, if I could predict the economy in 10, 20 years, I'd probably be in a different job.
Thank you. My last question, there's a term you use here several times called lower valley, which I think is a little bit different than the way we use that term. I think you're saying lower valley is Glenwood Springs and Westward.
And
basically?
Newcastle.
Yeah, Westward, Glenwood Springs from here in Westward. Okay. It says essentially a couple of different places in the staff report and in these slides that the ability for workers or people to afford housing comes up short in the entire region. And you showed us some numbers for Pickens County, Garfield County. You showed us some numbers for Garfield County, Glenwood Springs. What about the West End of Garfield County? Is there any distinction there? One of the things this city keeps facing is that we've got a lot of in-commuters coming to jobs here, ostensibly because housing is more affordable west of here. We have more finer screen data on that ability to afford housing in Newcastle Silt Rifle.
Yeah, so Newcastle is lumped in with that lower valley. Silt Rifle, Parachute are considered the Colorado River Valley. So we did that data separately. And then in the report, we also have the numbers by jurisdiction. And so we have these data points for Glenwood Springs. We don't have the city itself broken out. The data does do that, but we just weren't working at that level. But there's data points for Glenwood Springs, for Newcastle, for Silt, for Rifle, for Parachute. And so we can see how those dynamics, and that's for all the different housing typologies. So for single family homes and townhomes and condos, we can see where those markets are at in each jurisdiction.
Great. So as this moves to a next step, which you described, among other things, an action plan, then our staff and our housing advisory board would have access to that West End detail.
Yes, they should. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Yep.
That's what I was going to say, Counselor Townsley.
These are just questions that we're talking
We
about.
are just questions. Yeah, I was just about to shoot my gun and then.
So a couple of questions I had, and this is probably going back to you guys. Why, I guess, what is the part of our plan that was non-sufficient where we needed to add on to somebody else's plan to start with?
There are a number of ways. What the state did was kind of a courtesy review for us. So some of the points they brought up are probably arguable. There were 15 specific ways, but some of the ones that I highlighted in the staff report are kind of like the most obvious ones are that we do not talk about number of ADA units that we have here and our need for ADA units. Displacement risk, we don't talk about at all. They also highlighted stuff like the distribution of housing needs across our jurisdiction based on job availability and other factors. You know, we could probably argue to the state that we do that in some ways. You know, we definitely do segment out our need based on AMI, but it may not meet the strict criteria of the state statute, which came after we adopted our housing needs assessment.
Is that, said by hearing and receiving this, we meet that obligation. Is this an obligation to take part in funding from various programs of the state, or is this a state law where they say you have to do this, and what is the or?
The state law, which specifically is what we've alluded to a few times, SB 24-174, that requires most jurisdictions in the state, including us, to have a housing needs assessment. So there's no funding part of this, and there's no requirement to adopt it either, as we've said. We just have to receive, discuss, give feedback on this regional study, and we will have met our state requirement under that statute.
Okay, that seems kind of ridiculous, but if it meets something, then I guess that's good. So the numbers, and I think you've alluded to the fact that there's difference in data gathering and whatnot, but I'm curious as to if we need 628 homes now, are we still looking at that like those homes have 2.6 people in them? Is that kind of an assumption that we make with that, or no?
I think yes. you know, it gets a little tricky when we get into that kind of specifics because, you know, the data on average number of people per household is at the same data set as the data that Rachel and her team used to generate this housing need. So I would say probably yes, unless you have another take, Rachel.
No, so the way the housing need is calculated is we do household formation assumptions. So we're not saying, you know, one employee needs one housing unit. We're looking at the number of people and how that translates to units. And so we used it's like a couple factors, but we don't use people per household, but we use jobs per person and employees per household. And so it's 1.6 employees per household. So that's like one person working a full-time job and one person working like a 60% time job. And that is because we're averaging over all households. And so there's households where someone works one job, there's households where two people each work 3 jobs. And so on the whole, and that is from the survey data that was done in 2018, which what we've seen is that in general, those numbers over time don't actually change that much. Like we know that COVID really impacted things, but we recently updated a survey in Eagle County and that number didn't really change at all over time. So we felt comfortable still using that number, but it is an assumption that's made in the analysis.
So it sounds like it is a little bit of a mixing and matching of data, so maybe not quite 2 point.
So somewhere we need to increase our population by 30 to 40% to meet need. And then the only other question I've got just as far as questions is, in any of these studies, do you look at anything, you know, the numbers that you gave that I was kind of most surprised about were income numbers from Pitkin County and then down here. Do we ever look at the fact that, you know, certain employers should have to pay more money, a living wage to their people, or do we just look at the fact that somebody should provide these people with housing?
That's a great question. It's, you know, we're not taking any strategies off the table. We do also know that in this region in particular, even though there are a lot of low wage jobs, generally speaking, if someone in this region works, they don't qualify for what most other communities would call affordable housing. And so that's why a lot of federally funded projects are a challenge in this region because they're not flexible with the incomes. And so a lot of employers in the region already pay higher wages. And at a certain point, you know, there's only so much that somebody's going to pay for a turkey sandwich for lunch. And so once you start charging $40 for a sandwich to pay your employees, then the business goes under. And, you know, I'm not opining on the, you know, all the things in terms of business and cost and wages, but it is a factor that is considered. And I think in part of the housing action plan, employer outreach is a big part of that to see, you know, what are the challenges and what are the opportunities. And so what we hear a lot is, you know, employers would love to be able to provide housing to their employees, and there's just a gap in what they can do. And so that's where other partnerships and opportunities can come in. But it is a huge factor. And also, you know, someone like our school districts are limited in their funding. And so it just, it's an all around challenge. But I mean, it is a great point to bring up, and it's not something that's sort of ignored in this process.
My last question, and a little bit tongue in cheek, but a little bit serious too. Have I missed something where there's something out there that says people are required to live in Garfield County, they're required to live in Glenwood Springs, or that they have a right to live here in Glenwood Springs as long as somebody else is subsidizing part of the cost? Because it seems like a lot of this stuff is based on, okay, we have to provide this for people. We have this need to provide this for people. And I'm not sure where that need comes from, that we have to say everybody should get to live here. Everybody, you know, can afford to live here somehow.
No, I don't think this study is saying that we need anything. It's helping us understand the dynamics of what's happening in the region with incomes, housing costs, and jobs. And, you know, even in using commuting as a factor to look at housing need, we're not saying 100% of people who work in a location should be living there. We know that people have choice and not everyone wants to. And even using 100% as a goal isn't always like, even to put a number on paper is not always the best choice. We're again just trying to emphasize where different challenges are coming from. And then we know that it has impacts on our communities. And so, you know, when we have 2 people left on a block and every other house is dark because it's owned by someone out of town, it's less of a community to live in. And so then that drives more people out. And, you know, we see this a lot in places with big commute sheds, is as people move further afield and they have to commute further for their job, and they're just driving past more and more similar jobs on their way, they're probably going to stop at some place and not do that full drive. And so there's overall economic development, community development impacts of a housing inventory and market that doesn't serve local needs. And so that's all that we're trying to get at with this. There's no imperative, there's no need here. It's just helping to inform conversations.
Thanks. That's all. Oh, I have one other last question. You had a figure in there, and it seems like this can't be right, but I just want to verify it. 33% of Garfield County employees commute from outside the county.
Let me go find that.
It's on slide 7, bottom.
Yes. And
Does anybody else think that's a little bit crazy?
I mean, that includes like people living in Basalt commuting into Carbondale. You know, it's
Carbondale's within Garfield County, I think.
right, but Basalt is not. And so
I just was curious that we've got 33% of our workforce is commuting from outside the county.
I will also note that we had a lot of conversations, like consultants and staff, about the commuting data. Commuting data is like rental data. It's just a challenge. And so we looked at the data source that felt most real to what's happening on the ground. But it's all based on like employment location and home location. And so like where things are mailed and where people file their taxes and stuff. So there's a margin of error there. But again, just because the, you know, 3 counties kind of coming together, and we know that there's, you know, households, they'll live in one community and each person will go commute in a different direction. And so there are a lot of sort of inter-county flows happening.
Thank you. I think we're still in questions in this. No? All right, so seeing no more questions, let's move on to comments.
I'm happy to go first. First of all, I'm very pleased. I'm very skeptical. I was skeptical about a regional study, fearing that everything's going to get flushed down valley. I'm very impressed with this for a number of reasons, and I think it may meet a lot of our needs because there's tons of data that we can break out for our own needs. It is not prescriptive. That's important. That was a misunderstanding when the other housing study was. This is not a prescriptive study. This is what's out there and what may be needed. And I would say to Dave, I interpret need differently. There is no need to provide this housing. There's no need to provide housing for anybody in that definition. My definition of need is if you want to, for example, provide housing for your employees to reduce traffic commuting. If you want to reduce non-local demand, then here is the gross need. You may go ahead and meet it with some of these numbers. It's not a prescriptive thing in my interpretation. I think there's more data than we've ever had. And if joining this report will take pressure off our staff and expense off our staff and meet the state needs, then I am inclined to join on because I can still parse out this data. I like great amount that it's employment based because that's been a big issue in all our discussions about our housing policies, our traffic, affordability, and things like that. And it may lead us, as I've been asking, for us here to look at our policy. There's a lot of points here that we can look at. If we want to reduce the non-local demand, what tools do we have? Do we do more RO? We're preserving mobile home parks. The other one is how do you do development neutral? When Rachel's, if we look at reports, says we can't do development neutral, we need more units. Well, not necessarily. We've got L3 may not be the greatest example, but it's a unique example of converting free market, possibly less local demand to more local control. So there are many tools once we decide, I wouldn't say once we decide, once we update some of our policy wishes here at the dais, I think the tools here are excellent. So I really appreciate this, and I come away with this way more favorable, particularly for all those reasons. So thank you very much, and thank you, Watkins. Thank you, Council.
Any other comments? Councilor Schmall.
So compliment you on a extremely well done study. Before we take too much from it, though, I want to note that all of the data was since 2024. And you noted that you'd seen some significant changes in the last couple of years. So I think we have seen significant changes in the last couple of years also that are not reflected in this data. That's a correct statement unless somebody tells me otherwise. And I have a problem with the 30% gross income as an affordability factor because it affects so much of the rest of the calculations that go through the study. If you use a 40% gross income as the tipping line of affordability, you get 50% more mortgage payment or rent payment. Your 2050 as a 30% affordability index, what it buys you, $2,050. If you go to 40%, that makes it $3,070 some dollars. It's a big difference, and it has a big impact in all of these other numbers. So I've yet to hear an explanation of where the 30% came from, other than that it's an industry standard that was accepted years ago. My personal experience from when I was first entering the housing market, so I figured I got paid 4 times. I got paid weekly. 2 paychecks went to the house, 1 went to food, and half of the other one went to the other expenses with a little bit left over. So I think the 30% is really optimistic and wouldn't have been at all a burden if that's all I had to pay. And then the growth projections, I have to question where we think all of this growth is going to come from. Some of the shifts that I think we're seeing in the last couple of years are backed up in the reduced population growth in our society. The reproductive rate is down altogether across the country. If immigration is reduced considerably from what it's been over the past 5 or 6 years, for whatever reasons, then the growth projections based on the historic growth may be way distorted. The other part of growth that I think we may see here is because this is a very desirable area. Your whole study area is a very desirable area to be compared to, I don't want to make anybody mad, but probably 70% of the rest of the country would rather be here than where they're at. That's the extent of my comments. Thank you.
All right. Councilor Townsley.
The 30%, I actually did look it up one time before I met with Watkins. It's from the late 1800s. It's a random figure that somebody came up with, and it's been adjusted 5 or 6 times by different administrations as it's come through. There's no factual base to it other than it's just been a standard that everybody uses. It makes for great reports. They're not really applicable to us in a lot of ways without us adjusting the math to them. As far as jobs, it seems to me like we have jobs that totally are underpaying people a living wage, to where living wage in our community is different than a living wage in Iowa, living wage in LA, living wage in Boulder. You know, they're similar, but they're different. So if we're sitting here going, we want to meet need of all these new jobs that are going to come, why do we want more jobs that underpay people that exacerbate the problem that we have now? So if we quit feeding the dragon, then eventually, yeah, people may all of a sudden decide this isn't as livable. It's not as great a place to be because it's crowded. There's traffic. There's all these other things. We don't have enough police force. We don't have enough fire departments. We don't have all these other things. At the point there's empty windows and everybody's driving by dark places, that sounds awful bad. Prices will come down. That's how the free market works. We can sit here and do a lot of things. You had a comment that to me is just, it's bad to have non-regulated affordable housing. You know, in a socialist country, that's true. I don't buy off on the fact that that's where our community is.
Counselor Smith.
Thank you. Two comments, again, partly things that occurred to me in reading this helpful material and partly channeling the Housing Advisory Board. In your slides 10 and 11, but also reflected in some kind of summary statements in the staff report, and in your verbal presentation, we have here the notion that in Garfield County and in Glenwood Springs, housing and certainly housing ownership is what you call out of reach. You need 200% of AMI to purchase at the average price in the lower valley, Glenwood Springs, Newcastle. And then there's again, somewhere in these reports or in these various documents as a background, there's kind of then this leap to say, and therefore the emphasis needs to be on rental. There's a disproportionate need for rental is one of the conclusions put in here. However, on slide 12, I guess it is, it says the typical rent in Garfield County is $2,780. That's nuts. In both because that's incredibly expensive for rental, and I think it begs a question of what constitutes affordable rental and how do those two affordabilities or non-affordabilities interplay without leading to the conclusion that rental is going to be more affordable, because it doesn't look that way. If it would be very helpful to have in this study or in what you call the action plan, an assessment of what it actually takes to make rental living affordable, or if you have $2,780 to spend on rent with some sort of getting past thresholds like down payments and financing eligibility, can you jolly well indeed buy something? So that rental purchase interplay is not as clear here as I think could be useful. The other comment that really was tossed around in the Housing Advisory Board was not so much applicable to this discussion, but kind of looking forward. Beware playing ball with a state requirement. In this case, it's a needs assessment. Sounds useful. Councilor Schachter highlights the ways in which it is useful. The next one is an action plan. Beware the next one is a minimum construction requirement or some other state mandated taking over or telling how this community needs to build and grow. So that's more cautionary. It's more oriented to future conversations, but that was really tossed around strongly in our Housing Advisory Board. They're really proud of what they are doing, what city staff is doing, what the city's housing plan projects and guides, and they don't want that upended by some what they would fear to be arbitrary state requirements. Thank you.
I'm going to bounce in and just say something real quick. You know, this presentation that we just got is data. It's to inform conversations. You know, a couple of things that struck me, the 23% of Garfield County workers commuting more than 50 miles each way. And then I look to, you know, our partners to the west, there's an entity called the Colorado River Valley Economic Development Partnership. And they are exploring opportunities, I think, to create jobs and economic vibrancy to reduce those commute times. And so this is all going to change and evolve over time. And I think that, you know, we should look at this as what it is and information to push future conversations and put it in our pocket, but not necessarily become overly wrapped up in what we perceive to be some dictate. That's all. Any more? Yep.
Just
Okay.
last comment.
Hold up, let me turn you on.
Sorry.
You're good.
I think Steve's got a really good point there, that when you start putting, and this is what makes me nervous about that. They say, well, this, you know, in big letters on the very front of it, it says, this is not a legally binding commitment. You know, that scares the heck out of me. That means I should read all the fine print. And I think Steve's right. It's just like, you start doing this, and then the next thing you know, you got an action plan. And then we have an action plan that is based off data whose numbers are just not realistic. And then next thing you know, they say, now you have to go build all these homes. And the only reason I would be in favor whatsoever of signing off to this is that it keeps us from having to do more work or to come up with more money for our piece. Ours is probably going to say something similar, but I would ask our legal people, it's like, what happens if we just don't respond to this? You know, I just, it's a slippery slope, and I think we're starting down there, and I think it's not a place that I'm real comfortable with. You don't have to answer that, but
I mean, I'm happy to respond.
Sorry, I'm happy to respond. I mean, you know, it's kind of unclear what happens if you don't do some of the things that have been required by the legislature. I think number one, and Watkins might be able to address some of this, is you're not eligible for a number of grants. I think the state has made that pretty clear. Beyond that, you know, I think various communities are testing that, but I think that's one of the things that is in the forefront. If you start kind of ignoring some of these things that the legislature has told us we need to do.
And just out of curiosity, if you know, so the next thing to do is a strategic housing plan, that would still be something that we would have the ability to comment on, vote on, and decide upon it ourselves, right?
Correct. Yeah.
That is a statement, that same legislation mandates that we adopt a housing action plan by a different date, by January 1st, 2028. So that's something that we will be looking at.
Thank you. Councilor Hadley.
would you keep us updated on anybody that's challenging that?
I don't think nobody is like challenging it in court. I think it's some communities just aren't doing what they're told to do, but
Would love to
we
hear
can take a
back
look
from
at
some
it.
of
Yeah.
those communities. Yeah, this sounds like a bad place to go.
Councilor Shatner.
Well, I think we ought to wrap this. At the risk of being blasphemy, I don't think we need to argue over the data at this point. At some point, I think we should look at this in spite of the skepticism that I've heard on both sides of the dais. There is no mandate to build anything yet. It's been fought already. The pressure for statewide zoning has been fought. We're winning most of the battles. So far, we aren't told. What we need to do is say, hey, what is our plan?
Correct.
And execute it. This takes pressure off of us to get to that step. Our ComDev people don't have to build one. We can decide what we want to do amongst the seven of us with our fears and our goals, use as much of this as we want and free up some time. When the time comes that they're trying to tell us what to do, which has already happened under the current administration, it's been fought, then we'll do battle. In the meantime, we need to figure out what we want for Glenwood. And we are still in the middle of that exercise. This can help us, but it's not a mandate. So I hope we proceed with our own plan. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think that it's appropriate, unless anybody has strong feelings, we're going to move on. So next item, number 8, Planning and Zoning Commission appointment. And I apologize, I'm not familiar with the procedure for this. Do we take an official vote? Is that, okay, thank you. Do I just, okay, so I just need a motion to approve. So we, do I announce the candidate? Yes, okay, so is James Frail, right? Am I saying it correctly? Jim Frail. Okay, so item number 8 would be to entertain a motion to approve appointment of James Frail as an alternate to our Planning and Zoning Commission. Pastor Weimer?
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, if I may, I am happy to move to approve the appointment of Jim Frail to the position of alternate within our Planning and Zoning Committee. We met with him earlier today. He seems like an amazing addition to the team, and we look very much forward to getting him on board.
And do I see a second? Trustee Kennedy, thank you. All right, I call for the question.
Yes, Counselor Townsley. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski. Yes, Counselor Weimer. Yes, Counselor Schmall. No, Counselor Smith. Yes, Counselor Schachter. It passes 5-1.
Thank you. All right, so moving on to item number 9, which is an ordinance 2026-16, an ordinance of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, amending section 070.060.050F of the Glenwood Springs Municipal Code regarding the regulation and permitting of right-of-way encroachment license. Hi, Jim.
Good evening. Let me know if you got it. It's not looking like it.
You can do that. Right the packet. Yep.
What you doing there? Sure. Just fine, man. Good evening, Jim Hardcastle, Community Development, Economic and Community Development. This evening, in front of you is an application brought forth by staff. Planning file CDA 9039/2026 concerning municipal code right-of-way encroachment license policy and procedure. In front of you this evening are just a small handful of changes to the code section for right-of-way encroachment license. Your role is to consider the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission, which was noted in the staff report as a 7-0 approval recommendation to you. The recommendation findings that are outlined in pages 3 through 7 of the staff report. And important to note at this point in the presentation that a right-of-way encroachment is something that is put on the public right-of-way roads, streets, sidewalks, other city property, in line with private investments, private items, a small blade sign, a retaining wall, things like that. And the purpose of which will become clear here in a moment. Code amendment has 5 criteria approval items connected with it. They're in line with the comprehensive plan, city policies, lack of conflicting implementation with the municipal code. It is also necessary to address a demonstrated community need and responding to substantial changes in conditions with our policies. Also, it is consistent with the general purpose and intent of the code. The reasoning for these in front of you this evening is to make the processing of these more efficient and to get them finished in a timely manner, to minimize the cost and time for the applicant, for staff in preparation for these requests and presentation to City Council. Considerations for staff when looking at these are that encroachment should remain restrictive and subject to utility and mobility needs. They should be more permissive and predictable in denser areas to include and support patios and canopies, signage, things like that. And they should be context-based, exactly what the above says, looking at a wide number of interests and concerns and spatial element items. The first group of changes just clearly delineates and makes it more easier for us to process administratively items such as, but not limited to, landscaping walls, retaining walls, foundations, buildings, lighting, fences, although it does note less than 1 foot. We're looking at fences that may not be along the front. They might be on a side or a rear. But that gives us the latitude to look at those and select them as administrative versus putting them in front of you where they may not necessarily need to be reviewed. The second group just clearly delineates the director is responsible for administrative, and city council, not the planning commission, is responsible for review and approval of those of a permanent nature, not the ones above within the administrative review, which are non-permanent. The third group just clearly identifies a site map as a requirement for submittal, something that's been missed in the past. 4 also is in line with 2, eliminating the planning commission as a group that would be hearing this. And the 5th one is identifying a new implementation of the umbrella policy being applied to those of a permanent nature to be determined by the public works director and or the city council, which leads to the protection of the health, safety, and general welfare of the public from those encroachments. As I had lined out initially, the 5 criteria, upon analysis, this application does meet all 5. Proper public noticing was made for the P&Z meeting. No public comment has been received to date. As an additional reminder from us, you have the ability to recommend approval this evening, approve with conditions, or deny the code amendment. You can also continue the hearing in seeking more information that helps you get to an appropriate end. Clearly, the Action 1 code amendment in front of you this evening for the changes, the red line changes for right-of-way encroachment license started with a recommendation from staff to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Zoning Commission recommended approval to you. And with that, here's a suggested motion, alternative motion, and I can open it up to any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Counselor Townsend.
Quick question, just something came to mind as you did that. Does that umbrella policy for somebody like Rocky Mountain Pizza, where they've got, love their pizza tonight, but where they've got people sitting out in front of there in the public street, is our liability covered by a $1 million umbrella policy? Is that part of that? Or do we, it seems like that might be a little light on coverage if a truck ran into a bunch of people there.
We would need to, Ryan manages all the kind of sidewalk leases that we have. I think we'd need to look in the terms of those.
And then like the street, which would make me more nervous than the sidewalk.
Yeah, we are covered by that. CIRSA covers, we are covered by, our liability does cover that.
And we've got.
Yeah, we're good.
How much liability do we have in there? Somebody got hit, it's pretty high.
You mean in the leases for the individual property owners to carry?
Not just, I'm assuming we'd be drug into any kind of lawsuit on that.
Yeah, and we have governmental immunity and we have insurance coverage from CIRSA, from our carrier.
Thanks.
Counselor Snyder.
I was ready to make a motion to approve,
sorry.
but I don't want to preempt a question. here.
Any questions?
Okay, go for it.
Thank you.
Counselor Smith.
How does encroachment come into play? Is it something that code enforcement comes upon, or do people come in and apply to encroach?
Both opportunities exist for somebody to propose something that might not fit anywhere else on their property. They're thinking this might work. They put it on there. They come to find out that no, it does encroach into the right of way, or they are aware of their property boundaries and they reach out to us.
Thanks. If this basically defers more authority to make decisions about either version of an encroachment to staff,
Correct.
does the encroacher have opportunity to appeal to P and Z or to city council once staff has made a decision?
Yes, for the director, would that be P and Z? Yeah. Planning and zoning for the director's approval.
Thank you. And finally, does this go anywhere toward addressing the lot line adjustment difficulty that came out of a ballot measure A? One of the complaints about ballot measure A that says city can't sell land without a public vote, city can't annex without a public vote. One of the goofy consequences we discovered was that you can't even do something as simple as a lot line adjustment. That's an innocent encroachment in effect. Does this help with that at all?
Yeah, I mean. Transfers. Yeah, I mean, this is really for.
I mean, I think what you're talking about would be like actually conveying real estate between two different parties. I mean, this would be like typically, and we're just talking about rights of way. Here, we're not talking about other city property.
We couldn't use an encroachment as a way of call it an encroachment, but in effect you've
no,
fixed the problem.
This I believe only applies to city right of way.
Okay, thank you.
In property, but it's transfer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Scheck.
Yes, I would move to recommend approval of planning file CDA
If I may,
000039.
We have,
This is a
Public.
ordinance, so it's a public hearing. We need to open
Oh,
public
Yep.
comment.
Public comment. Sorry about that, public. Anybody there?
are there any other comments from the public? Seeing none. Feel free to
All
continue.
right. I move to recommend approval of planning file CDA 000039-2026, incorporating staff's findings on page 327 in the staff report.
And is there a second?
Could you do me a favor and read the whole ordinance,
Read the whole ordinance.
please?
Find a different page.
It's number 9.
Cool.
Let me turn you back on. Yep. Oh, sorry, go back.
Ordinance 2026.
Oh, go back. Do it again. Sorry.
Ordinance 2026-16, an ordinance of the city of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, amending section 070.060.050F of the Glenwood Springs Municipal Code regarding the regulation and permitting of right-of-way encroachment license. Move to approve.
Second.
Oxygen, please.
Now I caught the question.
It passes unanimously.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so moving on to item 10, which is ordinance 2026-17, which is an ordinance of the city of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, amending title 070 sections 070.040.110 and 070.070.030 of the Glenwood Springs Municipal Code regarding signs. Thank you, Watkins.
Yeah, and I'll give you a second to catch your breath while I share my screen. Okay. So this is a proposal to change municipal codes regulations regarding signs. It is not a major overhaul or anything like that. It's more akin to some housekeeping changes. And so before I describe what the changes are, just briefly, the process for changing the municipal code is first a review and recommendation of the changes by our Planning and Zoning Commission. And then y'all, City Council, will review and make a decision on them based on 5 criteria of approval that I'm going to get to here in a couple minutes. So what the changes are generally is to incorporate the Glenwood Meadows Master Sign Plan by reference into the municipal code, to edit rules for window signs, and that's citywide, so that's not in the Meadows specifically. And then again, citywide, to clarify and clean up regulations regarding illuminated signs in our downtown core. The P&Z voted on May 26th unanimously to approve these changes as proposed, so the same changes that you have before you. And I wasn't planning on going into detail about the Glenwood Meadows Master Sign Plan, which I think I'll just call the Master Sign Plan if that works. But it was established in 2003 as part of the Glenwood Meadows Annexation and Development Agreement, and there was a related part of that, a zoning and development plan. It is kind of generally more prescriptive than our municipal code is, and it kind of tries to maintain a specific aesthetic out there in the meadows. And the Glenwood Meadows Annexation and Development Agreement expired in 2024. And with that, the Master Sign Plan has kind of officially expired. So as a department, we've still been using the Master Sign Plan to apply sign regulation out there, but it exists in sort of a legal limbo. And so it's important for us to kind of formalize this arrangement and to adopt it by reference into the code. So what we're trying to do here is not to change anything out in the meadows, but just to keep doing things the way we're doing. And we need a code amendment to do that. At the same time, there are a couple of things that we could kind of clean up and make a little bit more clear and make our code a little bit easier to use. So these are really what I call housekeeping changes. They involve window signs, in which we would eliminate a couple sections and kind of combine them into one interior signs section. Happy to go into detail with y'all if you'd like. This is kind of a high level look at what we're doing. And then change one section of code that is conflicting with other parts. And it's related to illuminated signs in the downtown core. What are window signs? Here's some examples. So things that are in the windows, they could either be applied to windows or they could be hung inside the windows. There's kind of a few ways they could be. And so then getting into the criteria of approval that I mentioned, I am going to read these to you. The first criteria of approval is, are the changes consistent with a comprehensive plan and other city policies? Yes, they kind of support one of the plan's listed policies, which is reduce light pollution in a way, because if in the future we wanted to change our rules about light pollution, it'll bring all the signage, including the meadows, under the same set of regulations and facilitate future changes if you want to do that. That's kind of the only thing I could come up with and how it relates to our comprehensive plan. So that's not really a big implication. Number 2 is, do the changes conflict with other provisions of the code or other provisions in the municipal code? We say no, that we think these changes do not conflict with the code, and in fact, they help to clarify existing requirements. Are the changes necessary to address a demonstrated community need? We think they do. The proposed code revisions address the need to provide sign regulations in Glenwood Meadows. Because the annexation and development agreement expired, we need to know what rules to apply there. And it helps to clarify sections that are not immediately clear in the municipal code. Or are the changes necessary to respond to substantial changes in conditions and or policy? Yes, the change being that the annexation and development agreement has expired. And then other elements in this code are necessary for just the continuous improvement of the city's land use regulations. And then the last criteria of approval, are the changes consistent with the general purpose and intent of the code? We think they are, because the proposed amendments align with the general purpose intent of the code, which is to allow for signage within reasonable limitations and consistent with our community goals. So there are no significant implications with our comprehensive plan, but as I mentioned, if we want to reduce light pollution in the future, it can facilitate that. I have received one public comment, which is from the Glenwood Meadows Shopping Center. They support incorporating the master sign plan into the municipal code because they generally like the plan and want to see it continue. So I have these findings that are also in your staff report. You need to make findings for each of the 5 criteria of approval if you choose to motion to approve this. And so I have a recommended motion here that we can refer to if you want, but that's all I have for you.
Excellent. Bring it back to council for questions. I got Counselor Schmal.
This is not directly related, but it occurred to me with the annexation and development agreement expiring. What else in that original agreement is gone now? So does that mean that any further development in the meadows falls under our regular planning and zoning process, and there's no more, whatever was granted in the old agreement is expired, it's all new now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I might need Richard or someone to jump in here. I'm not prepared to speak to the whole annexation development agreement. In general, that's right. The underlying zoning, because there is underlying city zoning, that is what controls there. I know that the annexation development agreement had caps on the number of residential units that could be built there. And my understanding is those caps have gone away. So there are no caps because of the annexation and development agreement.
And Trent might have more insight into this, but there are a lot of things in the original ADA. There's been numerous amendments to it. There's design guidelines. There's a lot of different pieces to it. Some pieces have expired on their own. Others, I think we are kind of addressing as the cases arise where somebody wants to do something. We look at it and say, has this piece of the agreement gone away or is it still in effect? Because a lot of it relates to what are vested rights versus like what are regulations.
And another example I can give you is that there are requirements for new development to pay for a lift station that the city built a couple of years ago out there. And so that requirement is still in effect. All new development that are served by that lift station has to pay into that.
And I guess I would ask about the underlying zoning. Is the entire meadows fall under some pre-existing underlying zoning, or which had to be agricultural, right?
Well, at the time, I believe at the same time that the ADA was approved, it was approved with underlying zoning, city zoning. And so that's been in existence and continues to be. So you can look at our online zoning map and see what anything's zoned out there.
I guess the question is, here's one effect that we need to correct because of that agreement expiring. Are there a lot more that we need to be looking at because of that? That's my question.
We done? There. Any Steve, there you did he just turn it on?
Thank you. Planning and Zoning Commission recently went through a very thorough and extensive updating to both lighting, illumination, components of the lighting ordinance, and lighted signs. Generally, kind of the rough categories that they addressed were illumination levels, light trespass, light from awnings, and timing of illuminated signs going off at night. At least 2 of those are mentioned here specifically in the staff report. Change number 3 says illumination, other standards in the municipal code for illumination levels and light trespass will be in effect. What about those others? What about turning off lights at night, awning lighting? Anything else that the P&Z just did recently and the city council approved?
Yeah. So a cutoff time for lights to illuminated signs to be turned off. Yes, that is the kind of thing that would allow this change would allow that to apply to the meadows.
To existing signs.
Yes.
And
in the
existing
meadows.
lighting.
Yep, so that would clarify that. The part of your question about regulations for, awning signs, for example, that would depend a little bit because the Meadows master sign plan, it is very specific to out there and very prescriptive. So it might be different to our municipal code in some ways. Yeah.
Okay. And I think you just answered this, but I want to just triple check. These changes, including applicability of some of the new lighting codes that P and Z developed, will be applicable to existing Glenwood Meadows signs as well as new ones.
That's correct.
Great. Does this going to have an effect on the north-facing Target sign?
It should. In terms of, you're asking in terms of when it gets turned off.
At least the turn off.
Yes, I can't think why not.
Okay, thanks very much.
All right, so any further questions for council? Any public comment? Nope. All right, so I am entertaining a motion. Counselor Winder.
I move to approve ordinance 2026-17, ordinance of the city of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, amending title 70, section 70.40.110 and 70.70.30 of the Glenwood Springs Municipal Code regarding signs as presented.
And is there a second? Counselor Shack.
Second.
You were
Okay,
gone, but I said the whole thing.
call for the question.
It passes 6-0.
Thank you. All right, so moving on to item 11, which is a resolution 2026-07, which is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, adopting park rules and regulations.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. My name is Tim Bergman. I serve as the Director of Operations and Acting Parks and Recreation Director. Before you is Resolution 2026-07, which deals with updating the rules and regulations for city parks. The last time the rules were updated was in 2018. Our Parks and Rec Commission in 2025 went through the rules, met with staff, met with the public, had some public information on rules, and then they adopted these in February of 2026. You met with them at the last council meeting where we briefly touched on these, but these updated rules clarify some things, add in the boat ramp, drone usage, address the charcoal grills, and equestrian use in our city parks.
Counselor Shatter.
Thanks. Question, please, Tim, regarding fires and cooking. Propane stoves, 2-pound canister or smaller. The 2-pound are the little green ones, which we've been arguing about. Many people come with a 20-pound. Is there a reason to encourage the green ones over in terms of safety or use? They're hooked up the same, they're regulated the same. What's the rationale, if you don't mind?
I don't think so. I don't know that there's a lot of distinction on the 2-pound versus the 20-pound of that. Part of the underlying use there was to get rid of the charcoal grills and give people an opportunity to be able to use other grills. I think where the Parks and Rec Commission came from with the 2-pounders is that, a lot of people have like the smaller, the camping stove that'll work when you go to a city park.
I'm just wondering whether we intended that 2-pound or smaller. There's rarely anything smaller. Do we want to preclude larger canisters? It's just a question of practicality. They're all non-charcoal, so I didn't know whether that was intended or not.
I'm sure there is an intention behind it. I do not know about the 2-pound versus larger. I imagine some of it might have been, if your 20-pounder runs out of gas, I would prefer that you not leave that at the park. I don't want you to throw away a 2-pound canister in the trash can either, but that's something we can deal with easier than a larger canister.
Well, I would just add that the 5s, 10s, and 20s are not likely to be discarded because they have a significant economic value. They can be refilled or reused. So it was the only thing that stuck out at me. It might not have been intended. That's all. Thank you.
I think you're making a good point. I wasn't there, so I don't know the answer to that. But I think if you guys pass this tonight, we will at the next Parks and Rec Commission meeting, maybe bring that up. And if we want to make a change to that, we'll bring it back.
Thank you.
Okay.
Comment on that.
Well, I'm going to turn you on here. Counselor Townsley.
So I don't think that ever came up as, I don't think anybody looked at it as we want to preclude something. It was just somebody said, let's bring the others. So I don't think there's any heartburn at all on anybody's part over there to not have a 5-pound or something else. So. Thank you.
Would it be appropriate if we do move to approve this tonight to move to approve it with that amendment?
Sure.
Counselor Smith.
Thank you. I think I understand this Exhibit A, which is the list of rules, to be a mix of rules that have been there a long time and a few changes. They're just jumbled together.
Correct.
And I think the commercial activity one's been there a while.
Correct.
Has that been a problem? Is whatever that no commercial activity without permit and the attendant permitting process worked?
Yes, the permitting process works. I think it's good to just state it and remind everyone that you can't just have your business there or a festival there without our approval or going through the permitting process. I think as well on that, from time to time, there might be something that's going on in one of our parks that was not permitted, that has a commercial activity to it. So this is just kind of reinforcing that people do need to go through that to have an even playing field to use our parks for commercial purposes.
Great, thanks. And then finally, I love the item that says pack out all trash. Speaking of leaving things behind. Does that mean we're going to remove the trash receptacles from the parks?
No, we will still leave those there for your convenience. But no, it's just a reminder for people to at least, pick up their areas. Don't leave the place trashed. We will have the trash cans there, but sometimes it's nice to remind people.
Has the Parks and Rec Commission considered just removing the trash cans so that pack it out is more honestly emphasized?
In the 2 meetings I've been to, no, but I will defer to Councilor Townsley if they have.
I can answer that. No, we haven't. I think you would have a lot of trash. You'd have a lot of really ticked off people. And then just real quickly on your other question about the commercial, there was a problem over in Gregory Park where somebody was teaching horseback riding lessons, which led to both the equestrian piece and the commercial piece, and they were charging for it. And I think there's also some people that were doing yoga lessons and charging for it. And so those are pieces, and those are why those came about.
The yoga during the
You're
play.
not on.
Yeah.
Yeah, the yoga classes during the plague is what I was remembering. I still love the notion of pack out all trash, even though it's inconsistent with leaving trash cans available. Take it home. So any extra emphasis in publicity on that one would be welcome.
Hey, Counselor Schmal.
Didn't mean to go.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, that wonderful thinking, and I would love it if everybody picked up their dog poop too. And
I agree with that. I have a quick question. There's the one statement in here that says, about the alcohol. Could we add a line that says unless expressly prohibited? Because we do have the one park that we have expressly prohibited it there.
I think you can make that amendment in the motion.
Would that be appropriate to do that? Okay. I just wasn't sure. Okay. How are we looking? Any public comment?
It's a resolution, so
I don't have to do that?
yeah, you don't need to take public comment for resolution.
Okay.
Yes.
We do. So we do.
All right.
That's okay. No, I'm like, Learning on the fly.
That's good.
All right, so any further comments? This would be an opportunity for a motion. Counselor Townsley?
I move that a resolution to the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, adopting the parks rules and regulations be approved, subject to an exception for Centennial Park as far as no alcohol allowed over there, and also the allowing of propane bottles up to what, some are 20 pounds? Whatever,
Yeah.
let's say 20 pounds. If
Sure,
we're gonna lug a
sure.
bigger one down.
Yeah, sure.
Subject to those two things, it would be approved.
Seconded.
Motion and second, I call for the question.
Six zero, it passes.
All right, moving on. All right, so now we have council comments. Should we just do as Marco does and go down the line? I'll start with Counselor Townsley.
Got a couple questions for staff, but I'll save those till staff comments.
Oh. Okay, Counselor Schmal.
Nope, I'm good.
All right, Counselor Smith.
Thank you. Mine too are in the form of questions that may be unfair because engineering staff are not here. But the update to the engineering standards, chapter 5, chapter 7, et cetera, have come and gone twice to city council without success. Do we have a plan for bringing that back again?
Yeah, I think we just didn't get to it this time. It'll be back.
And similarly, reconsideration of the staff proposal for fare changes for the Glenwood Springs On Demand coming back sometime soon.
Yeah, that'll be back in the next couple meetings.
Thank you.
Counselor Shatner. No, good Lord, why can't I? I know, Sumner.
Thanks.
Sumner.
A couple quick things. We received from one of our constituents, the Eagle County press release regarding their emergency response. And I really like that. I would hope maybe our PIO would look at something like that, because our disaster response plan, which is outlined hugely on our website, is really more for our public safety staff. It's detailed. This one was, I think, set up for the residents and layperson really want to say, hey, here's in general what we're going to do, not a specific plan. I thought something to consider. It was very well done, in my opinion. Secondly, I think it would be worthy, and it came up tonight in a comment, that we come up with something, thanking Matt, but thanking our community for passing our street fund and showing what there's so much that's been accomplished and going on, and something specific for that, I think would be very helpful, and it's very timely during the summer. Just a thought I had. And the third thing, based on tonight, kudos to community development staff, all our commissions, on that regional study. Regardless of everything else, there was only one community that had all the boxes checked, and that was Glenwood Springs, for proactive steps regarding addressing housing in the way we choose to. So kudos to all of you. Thank you. That's all.
Counselor Weimer.
Just a question. It could be that I've missed this entirely. Colorado's 150th is coming up in a couple weeks. Is Glenwood doing anything?
Not that I know of. I don't think we're celebrating it specifically.
Chamber or anybody? Is there anything going on that day?
I haven't seen.
I've not seen a thing.
I haven't seen it.
All right, well. Okay.
That's the chamber.
Be at Rislande. All right, I don't have anything. So, city manager.
A couple of things. There's been some discussion around the confluence lately, and one idea that came up is maybe have just a little bit of a subcommittee from, a board member from the DDA, tourism, staff member, transportation commission, botanical garden, river commission, and just start kind of having conversations about it. Can we find a way forward a little bit? So unless anybody objects, I'm going to take that to our boards and commissions and see if people would like to volunteer on that. We did do an after action response plan for the fire that happened the other day. I'll send something out about it because there were a number of things that came out that I don't think anybody wants to sit here and listen to tonight, but we did do that. And I'll send out a summary. Welcome Glenwood sign is up. As you guys know, the letters are a little bit hard to see. It has been sitting outside for a very long time. So we're looking at ways to put a little bit of light on them and, you know, maybe color in the lines or something. Last thing, we made a job offer to and got an acceptance letter returned for our administrative assistant position. That was Sarah's old job. You guys are going to love him. He starts at the beginning of September. It was on our selection committee, very unanimous. I mean, it was, you know, so I was happy about that. And I called him and made the offer. And then after I hung up, I realized that the last two selection committees that I were on were very unanimous, were Tim and Trent. So see how that's going for us. I almost called him back and sended, but I figured it was too late. That's it for me.
All right. City attorney?
Nothing from us.
All right. Oh, yeah. All right.
Steve mentioned this earlier. Can we, I would like if there's more than one person here to get a quick update on the Mitchell Cooper, as far as it sounds like some things have changed in there and obviously affecting some community members. Could we get an update or go into executive session on that since it's still being litigated and get some more information on that fairly quickly?
Yeah, I think it's appropriate to have it in executive session. So we'll pass that on.
Anything else? Any correspondence? I think I saw some.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Chief. You're not on the list. I'm so sorry.
You guys remember, to remind you, Wednesday is the leaf night, law enforcement and
Yes.
family night. So we'd really like to have you guys there. Counselor Schachter has been in our dunk tank a few times. So those who are brave enough to come and join us right out here in the parking lot, please feel free to do so. I don't
I
recall.
know
I
you
think it's
invited me to do it and I was gonna take you up on it, but sadly I'll be traveling, so I.
okay. We'll have a DJ there, food, plenty of exhibits, booths from community stakeholders, you know, victims' rights, animals, and those kind of things. So we'd love to have you guys join that and share that with your neighbors, please. It's a free event for everybody. Thank you.
Did you say he's been in the dunk tank or drunk tank?
Well,
A couple.
Yep,
It's the
you got
same
it.
night- Is that the same day as the city picnic?
yes, sir.
Sorry, we have another question for you,
Quick
Chief,
question for you.
before you sit.
This, I'll try to be real brief, but it was on my list to come in tonight before the other gentleman came in. As far as the noise ordinance and these cars that drive around that are just incredibly loud, do we have anything of all the tools we've given you that allows a officer to be following, if I'm following you and you've got one of those cars, to say this is unacceptable? What is our options on this?
We do. We have, so we're moving now with our staffing back to restaffing our traffic enforcement team. And so those would be the guys and gals that would be focusing on those kind of violations, to include commercial vehicles, some of these modified exhaust vehicles, which I think are what the people are referring to.
Yeah.
And then a modified exhaust on some of these motorcycles, which are incredibly annoying. There's a legal standard, you know, regarding decibels and those kinds of things. We can present that to the court, but we do have ordinances on the books that allow us to take enforcement action. It really just comes down to an opportunity when the officer's in the right place. For a citizen to call and say, hey, I'm behind this guy at McDonald's, that's probably not going to work. But the officer's observations are certainly, that is one of the tools that we have at our disposal.
I would love to see us.
You,
use a couple of
yes,
those.
sir. You, me, I think everybody. Sure.
We had a question.
Sure, in this day and age of expensive toys, is there an evolving, like speed camera? Is there evolving noise, remote noise detector that can issue tickets that we know of yet?
That wouldn't surprise me that when that comes along. There's a thing called Shot Spotter, but that's a whole different thing for a community that we don't certainly need that here, but that'd be the closest thing to what you're describing.
Thank you. All right, now we're gonna talk about some correspondence.
Yes.
So as you know, you awarded a bunch of FAB grants, and there were a bunch of thank you letters. These are a list of them. Colorado League, Mountain Family, Meeting Place, River Bridge, Advocate Safe House, Western Slope Veterans Coalition, and Junior Achievement And Lift Up all said thank you. So thank you.
Who has not?
Yeah.
I did, but it's almost 11 and that's what time we're allowed to go to. So can't get to those.
Are- Well, so, yeah,
Yeah. So since our official minutes are actually the video, what I do with those when someone brings them in, I scan and send it to you guys. So I'll do that as soon as the meeting's over.
okay. Are we socializing after this? Anybody? All right, so we're gonna move on. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
I move,
Heck.
I would like to move to adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
I call for the question.
6-0, it passes.
I call this meeting over at 9:05.